Who was the most out-of-touch nutcase you've ever had to deal with? So I was at a bar, and some guy was giving an impromptu lecture on why millennials are so broke, and he blamed it on all of us being lazy students who don't want to work or go to school. When asked what he did, he said he was a property owner and owned a few apartment buildings. Then one of his friends chimes in with the fact he doesn't own any properties, he manages them for his uncle who pays him to do nothing all day. My friend stole my credit card information and bought loads of expensive stuff. I asked her if it was her before reporting it, knowing that A, she was going through a tough time and I wanted to give her a chance to make it right, and B, that I could be in trouble for conspiracy to fraud if I reported it, and they believed I'd got stuff delivered to my friend to claim fraud for the money back. She said no, it wasn't her. I thought someone else had done it, so I reported it. When she got arrested, she said she didn't think that they'd take the fraud thing so far. She thought you could just call up banks to get their money back, and they wouldn't even investigate. Wow, they really take this identity theft thing really seriously. Who knew? I'm fairly convinced that my current shift supervisor thinks anyone who works an overtime shift is doing it out of loyalty to the company and not because of the overtime pay rate. I have an aunt who's never really worked a day in her life because her husband created his own business early on in life. They live in a McMansion, and I was over once and we got to talking about fitness, and she told me, "Oh yeah, we send Pamela to this special training gym. It's only $200 a week. You should try it." The fact that to her it was only $200 really kills me. I made $9.95 an hour at the time. She's nice enough, but not in touch with reality at all. "It's a banana, Michael. What could it possibly cost? $12? I knew a girl who cheated on her boyfriend, and when he found out, he broke up with her. She said, "You can't break up with me. It has to be mutual." Had a friend who insisted she was in a relationship with a C-list celebrity who she met once during a comic convention. All of the celebrity's Instagram and Twitter posts were apparently for her, and everything had a meaning behind it. When the celebrity got married, she said that it was just for the media so she and the celebrity could live a quiet life. And then, when he didn't do anything for her birthday, she had a breakdown. She went to therapy not long after. Oh boy, I was 100% certain they were just a very dedicated liar until that last bit. It's good that she realized she needed help. Alright, it's my time to shine. So, I grew up with a lot of restrictions, had no idea that options existed. For example, I was only allowed 2 options of shoes, but the catch was that I needed to make the right choice. I didn't know that I could choose to make friends of my own. I'd just be told that this is your new friend, so go play with them. Sadly, my dad kept me in a small box, and he was the only one allowed to control what would go into that box or come out. So when I was 10, CPS was involved and I was taken into foster care. And that is when my world exploded. I didn't know how truly bad it was until they took me to a shoe store and told me to pick out ones I liked. I swear for the life of me I had no clue what to do. I stood there for what felt like hours until they noticed and asked what my favorite color was. I said green because that's what my father told me I liked. But I guess I was too overwhelmed and I just remember saying yes to everything, and I ended up with ugly brown and pink sneakers. What children learn to do at their normal age is what I'm figuring out in my 20s. So reality was a hard thing to live because the whole time I was in my restricted world. My cousin was spoiled and sheltered her entire childhood through college. Then her parents stupidly cut the leash without any preparation and just released her into society. She quickly got in trouble for bouncing checks all over town. My mum picked her up and asked what the heck she was writing bad checks everywhere for. Turns out, she was under the impression that as long as you had checks in your checkbook, you had money in your account. She didn't understand that you deposit in a number and then can spend or withdraw up to that amount. Please, teach your kids basic finance. And this was like 1996, before it turns into a "who even writes a check anymore" discussion. Settle down, guys. I had a neighbor once that was convinced I was flirting with him and wanted to be with him. He got all of this from the one-word verbal exchange we'd have while getting our mail, which was basically saying, "Hi." Keep in mind that at the time I was 16, in high school, and he was probably well into his 20s. He proceeded to creep on and stalk me. Examples included messaging me on Facebook, declaring his love for me, and feeling wronged because I was playing hard to get. He'd knock at our house door when he knew my parents weren't home and try to lure me out, saying that, "I just want to talk to you." He searched me up on all of my social media accounts and tried to contact me on all of them. He used my last name from our mailbox and searched for me. It didn't help that we lived in the same building. I got so scared that I could no longer go outside for a run like I usually did. I filed a police report and his family asked mine to please forgive their son. This completely freaked me out and my family decided to move. My old boss at the time was a girl of 26 who got $4 million from her mum a year to play with. Her mum is very wealthy in China. Her daughter is here trying to be a CEO of a company for fun. I accidentally got a job at that, well, we'll charitably call it a company. One day she told us we were all going to go on a group outing for bonding. She took us to an outlet mall 4 hours away, told the rest of us 7 people that she was going to go shop and she'd see us later. That was code for, "Don't follow me, frickers." Every 2 hours, she'd let us know she was going to go unload her bags in a giant van that they rented, and group texted us telling us we can meet her there to unload as well. We all got paid under $50K. We had nothing to unload. By lunch, she had proceeded to fill up the van with her crap. She then asks me where all of my new stuff is, and I said, "I'm budgeting right now." She goes, "Take out a credit card and go shop. That's the American way." Seriously. Okay. By 9 p.m., her bags were taking up people's seats and they had to sit with her stuff in their laps. She spent $30 grand. The rest of us spent about $70 apiece. We were tired and bored and cold. To this day, I still think she believes she did something nice for us and doesn't understand how polarizing and not at all team bonding that was. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of team bonding involved, just not with her. Well, yes, you're actually right about that. This was from a regional manager of Starbucks after they removed merit-based raises that could go up to a 5% increase to a flat 2% increase. When she asked if people liked the new raise system, I said, actually, no. We feel unmotivated with no reason to perform any better than just okay. The regional manager then replied, "Well, your staff need to realize that working isn't about money." One bully of a boss asked the 3 people who suffered most from his behavior if they'd want to move to a new employer with him as a team. How about no way in hell? Rick Snyder, former governor of Michigan. When the Detroit area was wrecked by massive flooding and most houses with basements flooded a few feet deep and people lost tons of their stuff and thousands of cars were written off because of the flooding of the roads, Rick let us all know that he understood what it was like. Because one of his multiple vacation properties had a leaky roof one time and some of his carpet got wet. A streamer that I watched a couple of times before his behavior drove me to stop. It was a shame because when he was actually gaming, I liked the content, but his attitude drove you up the wall, and by attitude I mean raging. Back when I used to watch him, the rest of the events I'm about to unfold hadn't happened yet. But the out of touch with reality part was, he talked about his girlfriend on stream a few times, nothing wrong with that, except his, quote, girlfriend was a female streamer who lived in Europe. He was from the States and he had never actually met her in his life. She got wind of this through shared viewers and debunked the story on her stream, saying she had never even interacted with him. This caused him to go nuts and start stalking the girl wherever he could, causing her to eventually stop streaming, delete all her social media, and so on and so forth. After his Twitch account was banned for this, he eventually managed to convince Twitch to unban him, and then did the same thing to a different girl. Now that he's been permanently banned from Twitch as a result of this, again, he keeps raging about it on Twitter. Just to clarify, I don't follow this guy anymore, but someone posts about him on the game subreddits every now and then, which is why I know the story. Some people are just bananas. Haha, well maybe you could have watched my stream back when I did that. I was the opposite. A minimum of toxic behavior as well as being terrible at video games and not able to be entertaining on the fly and focus on the game at the same time. It would have been a refreshing change of scenery before you died of boredom, I'm sure. Working in a pharmacy.
Hello, could I get the yellow ones, please?
Sorry, could I get your first name?
Oh, it doesn't matter. I just need the yellow round ones.
Do you have a prescription?
No, I always get them here. Little yellow round ones.
It went on like this for literally 20-something minutes. And here's what I found out in that time. By little round ones, he meant red or orange circular Xarelto tablets. He had been on a lower dose a couple of years ago, and he hadn't filled the yellow ones in over 18 months. There was one dispense tech who knew his name and knew his doctor. By sheer coincidence, she had greeted him every time he came in for the last 2 or 3 years. He essentially had no idea how a pharmacy worked. He'd only ever been to this one, only ever picked up one medication, and only through one tech who knew the doctor sent his scripts through every few months. It was surreal explaining reality to somebody who by pure fortune had just never experienced it. My stepfather's grandpa suffered from psychosis in a strange way. He wasn't able to distinguish mirror reflections from real life. He'd often be talking to the mirrors, his reflection, for hours. Later on, he wasn't allowed to have any mirrors because he'd believe that man was there to kill him, and would often turn violent. Turn violent as in he'd start punching and clawing against the mirrors. I knew someone who unironically tried to convince me that not only are Pokemon demonic, but they exist in real life and there are reported cases of them attacking and harming people. I loved Pokemon as a kid. I had all of the games and probably about $500 worth of cards. My mum suddenly said it was demonic and in her own words, "We have to burn them as a sacrifice to God." I'm still angry to this day. Also, she turned anti-vax around that time too. The worst part is I believed her because I was around 9.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
My sister-in-law. Kicked out by her boyfriend, she came to stay with us for a few days. We suggested looking for a flat or cheap house to rent near us. She won't live in the scummy part of town near us. She'd like a 3-bed house with a garden in the best part of town. She has no savings and isn't sure if she has a job. She was a part-time cashier in a supermarket and stopped going to work when COVID came. You should note that she wasn't furloughed, the supermarket was still open, she just wasn't going in. When I suggested maybe she couldn't afford $500K on a family home on her salary, she suggested she'd just get a council house, disregarding the huge waiting list and the fact that most council properties are in the ghetto parts of town. This is just the crust of a deep layer of unhinged fantasy world that she lives in. My sister grew up with everything handed to her and literally cried when her first car wasn't the color she wanted. Married rich, can't fathom why I can't just take off from work whenever it suits me, and says stuff like, "I wouldn't ask my boss for a week off, I'd tell him I'm taking the week off." A woman who I knew a few years ago. She had a job. She was convinced she was supposed to be a movie star. She never did any acting though. She told me about the married man that she'd slept with, saying, "He loves me, but he can't leave his wife." She actually did stop doing the deed with him, but they still hung out. Oof. I had a friend who started having an affair with a married man several years ago. It's a special kind of delusional. You have to convince them that 1. Their dream man is actually a butthole, he's breaking his wedding vows and tearing apart his family for riding you. 2. He's not going to leave his family for you. If he wanted to leave his wife, he would have done it already. And if he does, he'll also leave you for someone younger, hotter, and more fun in a few years. And 3. You're not in a relationship. Sneaking off to hotels, giving him down-under kisses in his car, and having you text his burner phone that he keeps in the trunk of his car is just not a relationship. My boss's wife, 28. She grew up in a wealthy family and married to a man who was 3rd generation owning the company he was in, and they were like a regional power where they were. She was talking to a staff that in general made like $36K a year, making fun of a staffer who was on his honeymoon. Tennessee? Ha! Tennessee? She looked around the room for everyone to join in. My God, how did she agree to that? We did Hawaii and that was the least I told mine was acceptable. I went to a private international school in London as a teenager. Most kids there had parents working good jobs, but in between them were some filthy rich kids, with parents in the oil industry or something similar. In 8th grade, we were talking about our Easter break, and my friend from Belgium was talking about how his family had decided last minute to go over there for the break, but had then decided to drive there because there were no flights available. Then this Russian billionaire classmate of mine asked him, "Why don't you take private jets?" She was so clueless when we started laughing. My brother, on his own income, and let's just take his rich fiancé out of the equation, can't afford to even live where he currently rents because he's on minimum wage. I work my butt off to buy my house on my own after working multiple jobs and saving up. He called my new area a crap hole in front of my entire family, when in reality, if he was dumped by his fiancée, he wouldn't even be able to afford a bedsit. Biggest snob ever. My dad gave him a super expensive, award-winning bottle of wine and he texted him saying it tasted fricking awful. My brother is in tons of debt, but because his fiancé's family is wealthy, he's acting like he's part of the elite and looks down on where I live, which is a lovely, affordable working-class town, by the way. Okay, don't worry folks, this is a positive one. A bunch of medical trainees were learning how to perform a pelvic exam on a female patient. The lectures emphasize very clinical language and how to perform an exam in the most professional and non-traumatic way possible. A male student complained that he didn't understand why we were being so picky. I realized that no one had explicitly said, "Many people have been the victim of the unspeakable act, so we don't want to re-traumatize them." So I said that, and we discussed how even if he doesn't mean to, he can scare or hurt an already traumatized person, and how he can never tell, and 30% or more of women have a history of something like this. He had never known this, and once I got through to him, I could tell it really shook him. Months later, prostate exam lectures were much less professional and much more butts. So he came to me and asked me why they were different. Couldn't men be the victim of stuff like this as well? It prompted some complaints and some change in policy. Good man. Honestly, we love a story of growth here on the channel. Look at this guy, going from being completely out of touch with the trials some of his fellow humans go through in their lives, to actively advocating for others of a similar nature once he's had the truth shown to him. It gives you hope. Next up, a story about someone who I'm absolutely sure was Lucille Bluth from Arrested Development. My cousin's wife got very sick while we were at a wedding in Mexico because she drank no water, only alcohol. She said, "There were ice chips in my drink, so I thought that was enough." Anyway, she complained because at the hospital, some of the staff didn't speak English. "You're in a Spanish-speaking country, woman." I worked on shifts with a guy for years who thought every single person was just out to get him. I've never met anyone who had such a warped sense of reality. He would joke on with someone, then go away for the weekend and stew on one particular thing that someone had said, and then come in on Monday absolutely raging over taking something the completely wrong way. I've seen him attack 2 people and heard about a third. The thing is, he's so dopey that everyone thinks he's harmless, and that's just the way he is. A guy I trained as an apprentice has just started on shifts with him and doesn't take anyone being a jerk well at all. I think they'll do well together. My father. He is a habitual liar. I somehow think he believes his own lies. Over the past couple of years, I've noticed he doesn't actually have anything new to say. He sort of just regurgitates sentences in slightly different ways. It's caused his business to fail. He lied to everyone that was employed there, saying he had to liquidate the company, going so far as to tell people he met with lawyers and the process has been started. I did some digging and found out there were no lawyers or liquidation. He just tried to duck the system. I have no contact with him anymore, but my brother says he's still trying to use the same tactics. I just feel he believes everything he says, sort of like living in his own head. Very sad that he damaged lives in the process. My girlfriend was traveling in China when she was 18 years old and was once randomly approached by a man claiming to be a scientist performing a medical study on feet. He'd need to measure the exact dimensions of her feet. For this, she obviously had to take off her shoes and socks, and he would need to take some pictures of her feet as well. Years later, when she tells the story to me and some friends in a bar, at first we start laughing but then realize she isn't joking, and still doesn't realize what had happened there. We actually had to spell it out for her. I'm sure she made that guy very happy for quite a while. I'm a mental health therapist who works with severe mental health diagnoses such as schizophrenia and stuff like that. So I've met a lot of people who aren't in touch with reality, but I'm assuming the question is more about people who appear to have their wits about them and just are very unaware about the realities of life. So, I have a sad one. My female cousin who was getting married was very shy, very nice, but not a popular kid. She also didn't attend family events or really build relationships with anyone. She was marrying a gentleman very similar to her, but with a wiener. However, her family were pretty well off, and their older son just had a huge expensive wedding with about 200 guests. Even though she asked for a small wedding, her family invited all of these family members and friends, and even though they didn't get any RSVPs back, they still went all out on venue and food and entertainment. Apparently, it was the same with the groom's family. He wanted a small wedding and didn't have much of a social group or family. So when the big day came, there were only about 10 to 15 guests in a venue set up to entertain and feed over 150 people with an open bar. The bride and groom didn't drink. Bride and groom were both extremely embarrassed, and it ruined the whole day for them given how awkward and quiet it was. My immediate family wasn't invited to the event. My family sucks, but that's a different story. But I always just felt really bad for her. Neither the bride nor the groom were bad people, but they were just reserved and private. and they had their very special day ruined by oblivious parents. Side note, a few years later, after building successful careers and coming out of their social shells, they had a pretty wonderful small renewal of vows in a gorgeous location with select friends and family. Parents of a 35-year-old woman who was hospitalized after suffering severe anoxic brain damage 20 years ago. She had been in the same ward since, barely conscious. They refused to get her transferred to a more suitable facility for 20 years, saying there's no reason to do so. Those facilities are for lost causes, and their daughter is going to make a full recovery, finish school, get married, and be totally fine. Working in hospitals got me quite a collection of these stories, but this one I thought was one of the saddest ones. My sister-in-law believes she's a strong, independent businesswoman who owns 3 major businesses. She does 3 multi-level marketing gigs. The irritating thing is that I actually do have a brick-and-mortar business that I've been running for 5 years now, and she's always giving me, quote, business advice and pushing me to join her for these amazing opportunities. It's so stereotypically obnoxious. Oh my god, hun, I totally understand the grind. Yeah, I bet you do. All said while wearing brightly horrendous outfits, caked on makeup, and smelling like decaying frankincense. I had a dorm mate who was kicked out of the dorm. He would leave number 2 all over the common bathroom and then just leave it. He didn't understand why everyone else was so upset. This happened several times until he was removed. Unbelievable. I had this friend who insisted that she wasn't rich and that it's normal to go get a boat worth like $10,000, among other presents, for your 17th birthday. Delivery drivers. Have you ever blacklisted a customer? My friend, who is a pizza guy, told me he asked his manager to ban a house because they always want him to wait until they eat the first slice, and then they complain the pizza isn't well made and ask for some discount or coupon, and they end up not paying their tip, acting all angry. Jerks. I delivered to the dorms when I was in college, back before credit cards could be used to pay for pizza. In the largest men's dorm, we had a war with some of the residents after they got angry when we wouldn't accept an expired coupon for a 14-pizza order. So they kept calling us up with ghost orders and making life real hell for us over the course of a few weeks. So we stopped delivering to anyone in that dorm. As we were the cheapest pizza in town, that didn't go over well with them. The RAs got every student in that dorm together and told them to knock it the frick off or get kicked out. So, we tried to deliver again and the same thing happened. So we banned the dorm forever. It was cool by me because those idiots would place between 5 to 20 pizza orders and tip $2. It was the mid-80s and there was no caller ID. Most of the students used the wall of payphones they had in the lobby, but some rooms had their own phone. Regardless, there was no way of us knowing who was calling. I was delivering for Godfathers in Memphis in 1988. We had both houses and areas that were no delivery. We had one area smack dab in the middle of our normal delivery zone that was blocked out. It was a low-income apartment complex. We got a new manager, and he was eager to up his numbers, so he quickly changed that area to being a legit delivery area. The first time he handed me an order for that complex, I explained that it was a really crappy complex and we didn't go there for a reason. He accused me of being racist and that I was too scared to deliver to a black part of town because I was white, and said that I'd have no problem going to a poor white part of town. That wasn't true. He just said to deliver it anyway and quit complaining. Okay, man. So I drove it out there and walked upstairs to the apartment door. I knocked, no answer. I look a bit closer and it's obviously a vacant apartment. So I head back to my car and I was sorting out my money bag and next order when I glanced up in the rear view mirror and I see 3 bad-looking dudes crossing the parking lot, heading right for my car. I notice one of them is carrying a weapon. Holy crap. I cranked up my crappy VW Rabbit, threw it in reverse, and hauled butt out of the parking lot. I got back to the shop and the new manager accused me of making it all up and said he didn't think I'd even attempted to deliver it. He says to go back out there, and I say no frickin' way, dude. So he insists, so I insist he comes with me, and he does agree. We drove out there, he carries the pizza up the stairs, realizes that it's a vacant apartment, and quickly gets back in the car. Sorry dude, you were right, it's a setup. We got back to the shop and he marked the whole area off limits again. Yep, sometimes new management discovers that these old rules are there for a reason. Also, at least your manager was not only able to put his money where his mouth was and come with you, but he actually admitted fault, so good for him. That's better than 98% of managers we hear about here. A lady on our delivery route was always just getting out of the shower when we arrived and kept accidentally dropping her towel. There wasn't a single driver in our shop who hadn't seen every disgusting fold and lump of that 300-pound acne-covered body. The manager finally warned her that if she did it again, she'd be banned. She, of course, did it again, and I like to think that the resultant loss of home-delivered pizza translated into a net benefit for her physical health, just as it had done for our mental health. I had a house who took the pizza, went inside, I'm assuming shook it violently, and then ran me down before I drove off, demanding it be free since it was all messed up. I said there's no way that happened, but I'd be happy to take that pizza and get another. He demanded he keep that one and I get him another. I said, no way. I ended up taking the pizza back and I got chewed out because they thought I dropped it. Then a few weeks later, they pulled the same crap on my boss. People are scummy. There was an older man who suffered from dementia that would order 4 fountain drinks and nothing else from my shop and then would tip about $300 every time. After hearing about it a couple of times, I told my manager, and we all agreed to get in contact with his family, let them know that we wouldn't take orders from him and that they'd have to take some measures to keep him from doing the same with other establishments. God only knows how much money that guy gave away. I used to deliver sandwiches for a shop. We had to blacklist this one lady who'd call up last minute and always demand 50 to 100 sandwiches for her meetings, and she wanted them delivered in 15 minutes. We explained to her over and over again that this wasn't how it worked, but she still demanded her order. So, when it showed up 45 minutes later than expected, she became a monster, causing a scene, not tipping, sending in complaints to the district manager. This happened so many times, and finally one day she called in an order for 200 sandwiches, wanting it in 15 minutes. I delivered the order myself, and she took the sandwiches from me for her meeting. I sat there and waited for her to sign the receipt, and waited, and waited. Turns out she took the sandwiches into her meeting and booked the heck out of there without signing. She then called her bank to cancel the charge on her card and called us in for fraud. She had the nerve to call up our district manager and said that we owed this to her, since all of her orders were late. She was blacklisted after that, and my district manager finally apologized for not believing me on this story. Pharmaceutical reps are the worst. I used to be a delivery driver for Pizza Hut. I used to work the Sunday afternoon shifts, and I'd have the same man order a supreme pizza every week. I was always the one to deliver his order because most of the time I was the only driver on duty that time of day. Alan was a nice, quiet man who had a lovely front porch. One day I didn't take his delivery for some reason, and poor Marvin took the delivery instead on the day that Alan decided to open the door, stark undressed. Alan had wanted to show me, a small red-headed girl, the goods, not big black Marvin. Alan never ordered another delivery from us for some reason. I delivered pizza in New Jersey. I went on the porch to see a snarling Rottweiler behind the door. Not a big deal, it happens a fair bit. I'm a stranger, the dog is just being a dog, right? The lady pushes him back and we do the transaction, and as I'm turning to go, the lady said, "Oh my God, he's out." The back door was swinging open and the dog was charging around the house, about to come onto the porch. I quickly opened the door to run inside, but the lady screamed, "No, the really bad one is inside!" And I saw a bigger Rottie just inside the hall. So I stuck myself between the screen door and the real door, and I'm trapped in an angry dog sandwich. The outside dog bites my calf because I can only close the screen door so much. There wasn't much damage, but I was bleeding. The manager goes to talk with the lady. It's like 1/8 of a mile from the store, or that lazy jerk wouldn't have bothered, and the Rottweilers were penned up out back. As soon as the lady starts talking to him, another small mutt dog zips out the door and bites him on the hand. He made the call on no more pizza for that household. When I worked at a pizza place, we just had one person that we wouldn't deliver to because he had always refused to pay and he'd hassled the delivery guy, saying the pizza was cold or took too long, wasn't the right order, whatever. He probably got a couple of free pizzas at least before we stopped bothering sending to him anymore. We used to have people try to claim the pizza was cold even after we got bags with ceramic heat stones in them. A pizza could be a lot of things, but cold wasn't one of them. You could have a pizza in one of those bags for 2 hours, and the bottom of the box would be so hot you could barely touch it. It was a pain having to keep those bags plugged in and rotate them so you were always using a hot one, though. We had a guy and 2 girls order separately, then grab the pizzas and run. The girls had picked the food up and left while the guy was paying. After 30 seconds, the guy bolted. It was a $100 order.
My manager, who's a frequent gym goer, leapt the counter and gave chase. The two girls had gotten into the car with the food, but when they saw my manager pounding towards them, they drove off, leaving the guy. My manager chased him for 3 blocks and was gaining on the guy when the girls pulled up and the guy got into the car. Unfortunately for them, all 3 of them went to school with the kitchen hand at our store, so we had their names, jobs, addresses, and Facebook accounts. We contacted them all on Facebook and we got them to pay for the pizzas the next morning under threat of contacting the police. We also put them on the no delivery list. You know, it's probably a good thing for these kids that their first step towards petty crime was such a harrowing failure of an ordeal. With any luck, it put them off trying this crap ever again. I worked at Papa John's. The only place on the no delivery list were bounced checks. We had one driver get his knee bashed sideways with a baseball bat and money stolen. I delivered to the same place the next night. Our managers didn't care about getting robbed because the driver was only supposed to have $25 maximum on him at all times. So everything over that $25 the driver had to pay for. This driver, I think, had to pay around $125 after being brutally injured. We were told for this very reason that after every delivery, usually 2 to 3 houses, when you came back to the store, you put all of your money in your drop box. Obviously, if you got $60 cash on a delivery, the store wouldn't make you pay for that, but they had a record of how much the order was and how they paid. Those guys were evil. Oh my god, I'm on the no delivery list of 2 restaurants because my roommate is a frickin' idiot and can't do math to save his life. He once sent a driver away after heated conversation with a minus 25-cent tip. Unfortunately, I was in the shower at the time. It wasn't until afterwards that he was explaining the situation to me that I realized what a moron he was. The bill came to $20.25. He gave the guy $20 and thought it was a good tip because we ordered 2 sandwiches that were basically $7 a piece and $1 for soda for a total of $15, so a $5 tip. In actuality, the sandwiches were $7.99 and the soda was $1.99, so that's $18 right there, and there was a $2.25 delivery fee, so $20.25. Unfortunately, the delivery guy spoke almost zero English, so all he could say was, "Not enough," to my roommate, and my roommate is an idiot who wouldn't read the damn receipt. He is no longer allowed to answer our door unsupervised. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We had quite a few blacklisted numbers and addresses. Mostly they were for people who wrote bad checks or that constantly complain or return orders or even make threats. One address that was on the absolute edge of our delivery area, a business all by itself on the edge of town, it got blackballed because people from outside the delivery area would give that address and meet us there. A couple of bad neighborhoods, including one that was literally 6 dilapidated trailers in the middle of a field, with a 2-track going back to it, and nothing but smackheads with pit bulls and Rottweilers with no leashes, they were blacklisted too. Our greedy owner refused to develop such a list even after 2 of our drivers were mugged at the same house. They wouldn't let us avoid neighborhoods, no matter how unsafe, no matter what time of day. Okay, so we had a really nasty apartment complex in one area of Sacramento. Totally a no. One night, a new guy took an order and actually accepted one from there. I was about to call back and say no, I was assistant manager at the time but running pizzas that day, when in come 2 cops to pick up their pizza. They listen in and offer to tag along. I was dumb and crazy then, so we made the pizza, and I loaded it into my little truck and drove out there. As soon as we pulled into the parking lot, the cop turns off all his lights and coasts into the spot next to mine. I walk up, start the spiel, and start listening to their story of this guy or that guy ordered it. I started to walk away and one of the shady guys steps out of the bushes next to me where he had been hiding. Instantly, every light came on the cop car, flashes, both spotlights pointing right at me, with the cops getting out of the car. Quickly. The guy steps way back. I walk back to my car, and a couple of cops got an extra free pizza that night, and I got a great story. Worked at a Hungry Howie's Pizza in college. They're basically a cheap discount pizza chain. We had a few stores in a college town. Mine served the local college campus and the areas out west and south. These included the bad parts of town. We had a list of about 10 or so neighborhoods or streets we didn't deliver to because drivers had been robbed. One of which happened near a rather large government housing project. That never went over well when I had to explain it to people. They often cussed me out like it was my idea or called me a racist. We also refused to hire female drivers because of an incident before I was hired. A group of people made multiple fake calls throughout the night to different addresses until the female driver showed up. When she did, they kidnapped her for days. She was a victim to some truly heinous and unforgivable crimes. One of our drivers was kind of a crazy homeless guy who had some anger management issues. One time, a guy pulled a shotty on him while he was still in his car. He was having a bad day, so he just grabbed the barrel, pointed it forward, and floored the gas pedal. He also used to sunbathe in his white briefs in the nasty parking lot behind the store while laying out on old pizza boxes. Apparently, our entire complex is on the Do Not Deliver After Dark list at a local pizza place. That was encouraging to find out a week after moving in. Oh no, that's a fun one to break to your flatmate or partner. Guess what? We're the hottest spot for armed robbery in the county, and we're ineligible for services due to risk of injury to their personnel. Great job vetting the flat. In the late 90s, I was still living in Detroit and I was in between desk jobs, so I delivered pizza as a part-time gig. Detroit's neighborhoods have been rough for a few decades now, but the 90s seemed like they were on their own level. I won't say the specific neighborhood, but there were some really rough ones. This one house, though, this house was just in awful shape. I kind of figured this would be bad even as I was driving down the street to get there. Every other house literally was either burned out or very obviously abandoned. This one was just crappy looking, but I tried to be optimistic. I walked up to the door, the awning kind of drooping over my head, and I knocked. Almost instantly the door cracked open, and all I saw was a dark hand with what looked like a Glock.
Just leave the pizza and walk away.
I complied, obviously, and told my manager that I wouldn't be delivering to that neighborhood anymore. I still stuck around with that job for another 6 months or so, but that was probably the only thing on that level that I've ever seen. Prior to my freshman year of college, 2002, I was delivering pizzas for Pizza Hut in a decent suburb outside of Cleveland. Now, I was kind of the typical green herb-using, partier, easygoing delivery guy. As a bit of background, one afternoon, my manager requested that I go to change several $100s for smaller bills for our register. As I was leaving the bank after getting change and getting into my car, I sense someone approach from behind and suspect they're going to ask me for a cig. Nope. Instead, it's a guy with pantyhose on his head and a knife who demands the money I have in my pocket, and my keys. I oblige, and he ultimately runs off and tosses my keys into the parking lot where I can see them. When I run into the bank, no one at all saw the incident, and wouldn't you know, when they pull the footage, there's sun glare in the exact spot on the window where my car was parked. The cops interrogate me and search the car, but seem to conclude that I was in fact telling the truth. My manager even vouched for me, saying how I was a good kid. Flash forward to about 10 years and I was telling the story at a party and bam, it hits me. My manager, who often dated unsavory characters, set up the whole thing. Considering I was robbed in front of a bank in broad daylight on the busiest street in my town, who the heck would know to rob me, especially since I hadn't put my car topper on at this point. I worked at a Little Caesars when I was a teenager. On a really snowy night, one of our drivers got into a car accident and sadly lost his life on his way to deliver the pizza. The customer called in a little while after we learned about the accident and absolutely lost it that his pizza hadn't been delivered. When the manager explained the situation, he stated he didn't give an F and wanted his pizza delivered for free. Needless to say, he got an earful from my manager and was put onto a no-serve list. Delivered pizza in high school living in New York. There were a couple of neighborhoods that we had to be escorted to by cops who were permanently stationed on the corners there. When you got to the building, we had to wait in the security booth that had bulletproof glass on it. This was all because some people would call delivery places and just rob the people of the money they'd carry, sometimes their cars as well. Our delivery store has a woman who used to come in every so often or order delivery and who didn't want black people to interact with her or her food at all. One of our drivers, a really nice old black guy, delivered to her and she simply slammed the door in his face. Another time, she walked out on a black cashier because she swapped places with the white driver who was originally taking her carry-out order. Finally, the manager put his foot down and told her not to come back or order from us ever again. I'm a former Domino's driver in a central Florida hood. The no-service lists were apartment complexes or streets where drivers had been robbed at weapon point. The downtown store had some places it would do in daylight but no service after dark. Screw that job. I worked as a delivery driver for Papa John's in high school. It was a nice weekend job, lots of nice people in my area. Naturally, there were a couple of idiots who we didn't like to serve and later added to the blacklist. One memorable house was this guy. This frickin' guy. He would order massive amounts of pizza, I'm talking anywhere from 7 to 20, and he'd pay with cash. So naturally, we'd call ahead of time to make sure it was a legit order and that we'd get paid for the pizza. He'd answer, tell us that it was all good and that he had the cash. It would always be the same order, X amount of thin crust pizzas with double anchovies and olives, extra cheese. I'd load up my car, drive over, and he'd never be there. Lights off and everything. Needless to say, we were all mad. This went on 3 times before we decided to add him to the blacklist. Then we'd get the same order to other houses. We'd get sketched out and not deliver to these houses. This happened over time with many anchovy and olive orders made, and we added like 6 or 7 houses to the blacklist. Not the craziest story, but it's the only pizza blacklist story that I have. Pizza guy here. We don't have such a list, but we do remember which houses are regular jerks and which ones try to scam free pizza by complaining. Usually we just send another pizza, but we make the regular baseless complainers send the first one back. We've never had anything truly bad happen to us to make us stop sending to people altogether, but we've sent different drivers to some places, like if a coworker is being hit on and it makes them uncomfortable, we'll send someone else to the place. I'm sure if something bad enough happened, we'd cease delivering to that address though. I worked for a restaurant delivery service and we had 2 people that stick out in my mind. The first was this incredibly misogynistic and just awful insulting man. He'd call and order, being a sexist jerk the whole time. I don't give a frick about any goddamn specials, sugar chest. Just give me a rib plate. And then 10 minutes later he'd call back livid because his food wasn't there yet. Now listen here, you goddamn witch. I hated that man, and it was glorious when my boss snatched the phone from me mid-tirade and told the guy off. The second was one of the brothels. All the other places of ill repute were actually really nice and tipped well. This one in particular though, they'd straight up snatch the food out of your hands and slam the door in your face, try to scam you out of money with these making change tricks. They complained about every order, screamed at all our drivers and order takers, and other stuff I'm sure I've forgotten. This was a long time ago. You'd think that given the nature of their business, they'd want to avoid the attention of the law, seeing as how they didn't even bother to conceal themselves under the name massage parlor, but openly flaunted that they were a straight-up place to get some. I'll never get that one. I imagine that's why they were spectacularly busted about 6 months after we quit delivering to them. When did reading your contract save you from a con artist? I signed up for a gym membership on a whim and got sketched out when they initially charged me $250 instead of only $90 for the month. I went home and I legit didn't sleep because I was so mad I went through with it. I called and asked the next day to see if I could cancel, and almost everyone I spoke to said either no, it was impossible, or only if I moved to an area that didn't have the gym. I checked the contract and you could cancel within the first 2 weeks, and I was only 3 days into the contract. You bet your butt I cancelled so fast. Gyms are notorious for being hard to get out of their contracts. LA Fitness wouldn't let me cancel online or in the gym itself. I had to send a letter to their HQ in California or some crap. They claimed they never got it. I had to send it certified in order to force them to acknowledge that they got it. I just recently cancelled a lifetime fitness membership as well. They weren't as bad. I went to customer service and said I wanted to cancel. They said no problem, but then the computer he was using won't let me sign it. Here, let's go to my office. At which point he tried to get me to stay. Once I said it was because of where I lived now, he was completely understanding and got me cancelled immediately, so it was comparatively good. My landlord agreed to let me move out a month early since he wanted to lease the apartment to someone else. We had to sign new paperwork to let me out of the original lease and to make me agree to be out by an earlier date. I knew he was a recently convicted forger, so I made sure to read what I was signing. He had added the condition that if anything fell through with the new tenant, I'd still be on the hook for rent after I moved out. I called him out on it and he said, "Oh yeah, I just added that part to protect myself." And then he stole my deposit. I still need to take him to court for that. Frick you, John, I've got a few more months before the statute of limitations is up. I've just left him one final voicemail and I'll proceed with the civil case if I don't get my check by the end of the week. I went to buy a new phone for $200. The $200 mysteriously changed to $300 while the document was sitting on a desk overnight. I called them out on it and I got it from somewhere else. Oh boy, that guy really was after a bigger chunk of commission, right? I hope he got chewed out by his boss for that one. That's not cool. My wife and I were at a car dealership buying our first car. The dealership was offering special no-interest financing for recent college grads, and we were using that to finance the car. The finance guy presented us with two options, a 3-year payment plan and a 5-year payment plan. The whole time he made it sound like the zero interest applied to both, so we went for the 5-year plan to get a lower payment. Finance guy tries to get us to sign without reading the paperwork, but we weren't having that. We come to find out the longer payment plan didn't qualify for the no-interest deal, and we were getting charged 6.5%, which is a hell of a lot more than zero. We got angry and threatened to walk out after we realized what they were trying to pull and got them to come down on the price. I know they've pulled that on other recent grads who don't read the paperwork and just sign. Some workplace demanded at least 4 years of employment, or else we'd have to pay for those 4 years as you would pay for a course, in case of earlier quitting. What a con. My last restaurant job had a non-competition clause in the new handbook. I pointed it out to my coworkers, few signed, and it was revised in a week. Scumbags. You're more likely to put up with bullcrap if you're not allowed to get a job somewhere else. I went to pick up my car from the dealership, and it said by signing the paperwork it gave them permission to lend my information to third parties. Nope. When I bought my new car 3 years ago, the finance department processed and had me sign paperwork at a certain price. Then they called me 3 days later and told me that their lender fell through and I'd actually have to pay an additional $100 a month. I brought in the paperwork with the price I signed for and the keys, told them they'd stick to the contract or they could have their car back with the additional mileage. Apparently this is a fairly common practice at car dealerships. Beware, folks. I'd taken some helicopter flying lessons and I was considering switching careers to that. So I found a flight school and applied for a student loan. Sally Mae was the only one that would cover it. And when I got to the final paperwork, the interest was higher than they'd told me over the phone, and the total payment to them was going to be well over $200,000. So I cancelled and didn't go to flight school. At my high school, they set up Wi-Fi for us to use. However, in the terms of service, it said that by signing into the network, the school had permission to search the phone and look at its contents. I did not sign in, and I haven't to this day. I work in the music industry. A label wanted to sign me, and the entire contract was in very, very broken English. Amongst the idiocy on the contract were such gems as signing over my name, copyrights to all of my past songs, and being held financially accountable for any physical albums that didn't get sold. F that. Buying my house. My husband signed the paperwork and I went in later that day to sign. I started to read through the loan application. The mortgage lender was like, "What are you doing? You don't have to read that. Your husband already signed it." And I was like, "No, I want to make sure it's what I want." The loan was $250,000 at 25%. Yeah, right. Didn't sign it and I got out of there. The mortgage guy said he was going to take me to court. I said, "Go ahead, it'll be cheaper than what he wanted me to sign." I took over all the mortgage stuff from then on. The mortgage guy was a friend of a high school friend of my husband and later got busted and arrested. He lost everything and had to have his parents bail him out. Also, the mortgage lender we'd had go through our FHA loan got arrested for selling bad loans. Do your research, people. I viewed this great flat and I was ready to hand over a deposit when I decided that I should actually read the rules they'd sent me once over again. I read the one they gave me when I reviewed the place, and it was a bit strict, and in general I thought it was silly to have written rules when you're paying that much, but then again, it wasn't anything I couldn't handle. Thank Odin I checked. The rules listed in the email were completely different and included gems like, if you wish to bring a guest to the house, you must put forth a request in writing at least 1 week prior and must be approved by all members of the flat. There will be no guests allowed after 10 p.m. Absolutely no guests staying over. Any guest that comes over will require a $20 fee to go towards water usage for the toilets. And I was like, you want me to pay over $1,000 a month for my own private room and not be able to invite people to come over without jumping through ridiculous hoops? I noped out real quick. There were a few other ridiculous things, but that took the buns. We were in the process of selling our business. My wife's car was registered under business. We sat down with our lawyer to discuss what's included in the sale, equipment, supplies, etc., and we clearly told him the car wasn't included in the sale. Well, guess what? We received the typed-up contract from our lawyer, and he had added the car along with other things. Thank God we read it and had it removed before signing it and sending it to our buyer's lawyer. A lease I once had said, "The landlord agrees at the renter's expense to blah blah," with the blah blah thing being a list of deep cleaning services to be completed at the end of the lease, like many hundreds of dollars worth. Similar story, I signed a lease which included a requirement that I steam clean curtains and clean carpet prior to leaving. I got the curtains done at a cleaner and did the carpets myself with a rented cleaner. The company did my inspection and claimed curtains and carpet haven't been cleaned. I argue and she says, "Well, you need to get it professionally cleaned, it's in the lease." Well, I knew it was BS and said, "Okay, get a copy of the signed lease and prove it." She rifles through a drawer and says, "I can't find it, but trust me, it's in there." I did nothing and nothing happened to punish me. I was sent a freelance contract for a job offer in the media industry. I was a graduate at the time with 2 years' experience. I was offered £6.50 hourly pay with the expectation that I must be available to work 37.5 hours per week. I had to use my own car for business purposes but couldn't claim expenses for fuel or mileage. And above all, the contract demanded full rights for the company to use any creative works I produced within 2 years before the start of the position. I didn't accept that job. 2 years before? What the frick? That's delusional. I could understand companies wanting rights to whatever you create on company time, but I just cannot understand why companies think they can just own their creative employees. Frickin' artists get shafted so much. I'm glad you read the contract and noped out. Yep, on behalf of all creative contractors, screw that kind of work. Working in just about anything to do with design, art, or performance is a frickin' minefield sometimes. Thankfully, there are some good bosses out there who understand. My husband, then fiancé, was getting ready to buy a used car that's often used for street racing and rally racing. He doesn't do that, but it is a fun car to drive. And when you buy one, it's pretty much sure to have aftermarket modifications if it's been owned by someone who used it for racing or as a status symbol. My husband had done his research, and neither of us were going to be taken for a ride, and even though this was the car we definitely wanted, we were prepared to walk away. It was fairly low mileage. The dealer, a third-party outfit, not a brand dealership, kept swearing up and down that the car was still under manufacturer's warranty and had no aftermarket mods. I was skeptical, to say the least. I knew that if the car had any aftermarket mods, the warranty would be void for that portion of the car, if not the whole thing, depending on the extent of the influence of the mods. I read every piece of paperwork they wanted my husband to sign and explained them to him, but I couldn't find anything that guaranteed the car was still under manufacturer's warranty. So I straight up told him to walk away from the deal unless they gave us a piece of paper that both parties signed that said exactly that. And they did it. Lo and behold, the car had an aftermarket downpipe, a really nice one that had been installed improperly. It was affecting the airflow through the engine and could have potentially caused permanent damage to said engine. It was going to cost us hundreds of dollars to either have it reinstalled properly or return the engine to its original unmodified state, which would give us warranty compliance. Yay! But surprise, jerks! We had a piece of paper that gave us a hold on their testes. They tried to avoid us for a week or so until we left them a voicemail saying that if we didn't hear from them in 24 hours, they'd be hearing from our lawyer. And that's how we didn't pay for having the car restored to warranty specs. We even got to keep the downpipe. It's kinda spiffy. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Mine wasn't really extreme, but my girlfriend and I were shopping for houses and we were checking out a townhouse-style condominium. The price was within our budget and the monthly maintenance fees were average for the area. It was an open house event hosted by a retailer, so the property's annual expenses were included in a pamphlet. I found that on top of the regular monthly maintenance fees, which were around $350, there was an additional expense of $800 every 6 months. I asked why there was an additional expense if there were already regular fees, and she responded that the extra $1,600 per year was used to keep the fees low. I responded that the fees are average for the area and many places in the same neighborhood are already lower. Long story short, it was a nice house, but we didn't pursue it further. I'm on board with the idea of condo fees if they cover things that I would normally pay for, like heat and water, snow removal, or garden care, and if they needed additional expenses for major upgrades like new roofs or doors or windows. But expecting 12 houses in the row complex to each kick in a $1,600 bonus every year without specific accountability isn't something that interests me. In the US Marines, I was enlisting for a program that's 5 years of active duty. At age 19, I get the contract and it says 8 years. Nobody had ever mentioned anything about that. I ask, and the recruiters point out it's an overall 8-year contract, but only 5 active, and the other 3 years I can serve in the reserves or in the inactive ready reserve. They explain that the IRR means you're still eligible for service on paper but have no monthly or annual obligation except keeping your address updated, and that all it means is if World War III breaks out and they're drafting guys anyway, you'll come back in at your old occupation and rank. So I signed. Note that this was pre-September 11th, when we had no major wars going on. September 11th happens. I do 2 tours in Iraq while on active duty, and 6 months before my 8 years is up, I get involuntarily recalled and sent to Afghanistan for the final 6 months. I just bought a used car, and my wife and I had to bring our newborn to the shop. She hadn't gone number 2 all day, and I knew from her doing it a day earlier that a monster turd was brewing. Well, it happened in the finance office, and she pooped all over me. Now, just before this, we talked about the $250 cancellation option, how I didn't want it, how I sold cars in my past. We had a good conversation about it. Well, this jabroni gave my wife a digital paper to sign to reject it and zooms in to help her sign, but is really obscuring the fact that he had her sign for it. After I emerged from the bathroom, covered in watered-down number 2, I read the whole long form and caught it. He pretended not to know what the charge was, then he said it would take hours to manually redo it. I told him to get to it. It didn't take hours. I didn't know about the signature until after I got home because he gave me a digital copy of that on a USB drive. When I got home and looked over the digital part of the contract, I was floored to see and put together what had happened. That jerk saw us struggling with our new baby and thought he could steal $250 from us to pad the back end. First-time renter here, I moved out of uni residence to get my own place so I could take my family cat. Found a nice little apartment for cheap downtown. I intended to move in with a roommate or 2 to split the cost, close friends of mine. The landlord didn't speak English very well, so although he insisted, "Oh yeah, everything good, everything okay," I wasn't sure he understood what I wanted. When he bought out the contract, it said in writing that pets weren't allowed and the cost would increase for more people living there. I pointed it out to him, but he retorted to the effect of, "I use this contract for all tenants. Those rules don't apply to you." Bullcrap. I told him I wasn't signing unless he rewrote the contract, but he refused, saying he wasn't going to waste time pandering to paranoid people. I offered to write the contract myself and was baffled that he agreed to it. So I wrote up my own contract with super lenient conditions, making sure to protect my own butt. Had a lawyer look at it and notarize it, and now I live with my cat and roommates at the original cost. I went to a reasonably well-advertised jewelry shop to pick up an engagement ring. Knowing that I wanted it to be a surprise, and that she'd want to pick out her own ring in due time, I made sure that the ring would be returnable for full price and even for a full refund from that store when I bought it in for $900. After the proposal, my then-fiancé found a ring she liked better at a different jeweler, so I went to return the ring. When I said I wanted to return it, the clerk said, "No problem, just sign this and we'll get you sorted out." I read the small paper and it stated something very close to, "I now confirm this sale to be a final sale and cannot be refunded or returned for any reason." I read it, pen in hand, looked at her and said, "Why would I sign that?" She took the slip back, got her manager, and I was able to get the full amount returned via the same way I paid on my debit card. For those interested, it was a People's Jewelers in Vancouver. That's insane. I have to wonder whether that was a con artist that was being pushed from management or the higher-ups, or whether this one salesperson was just really gung-ho and trying to save on commission no matter the cost. It was a wild gambit to take in any case, handing a customer a piece of paper that may as well say, "Please do the opposite of everything I've just asked for and keep my money." When we were young, my friend signed for a pre-owned Audi and came over to my house. Said it was like $300 a month and the contract was in his glove box. I read the paperwork and told him, "You know this says $550 a month, right?" He was clueless, but thankfully it was over a weekend, so Monday morning he went back and caused a scene to give the car back without penalty. My wife and I were 3 days away from signing paperwork to buy a condo, and they sent us the latest, and we noticed that they changed the interest rate by a tiny amount, like 0.2%. They said the change was because they reran our credit, so they altered the interest to reflect our current credit rating. That left a bad taste in our mouth, so we said no thanks and walked away. The next week, my company got bought out and they moved us out of state. If we would have signed, we would have had to either immediately sell or quit my job. We bought a new RV and received a coupon for 3 nights at a luxury RV campground park. Of course, to receive the free nights, we had to sit down with salespeople trying to sell us a membership first. My ex was very gullible and gobbled up the free cookies and sales pitch after they showed us the beautiful photos of their campgrounds all over the state. There were many promises made of ocean views, clubhouses, swimming pools. I was young and he was definitely the one in charge at the time, so the next thing I know, the 3 free nights turn into a full-blown membership with extremely pricey annual fees. But now we can camp anywhere, anytime, right? We head out that weekend to the dedicated property for the free night, and it's an absolute crap hole. There is no ocean view, the pool is covered in scum, the clubhouse has the smell of a mismanaged senior home with 3 residents staring at us oddly. Basically, it's a gravel-lined trailer park for people who live in their RVs. I'm angry, the kids are sad and trying to play on the rusty swing set. We bailed out that night after driving 3 hours, and the next morning he tried to cancel. They'd told us we could cancel at any time, but… yeah, right. After rereading the contract, this was a lifetime membership and you couldn't cancel it without following their exact fine print instructions of cancellation via certified mail written in the blood of your firstborn. It also had to be sent within 48 hours of signing. These jerks send people away for 3 days to a dump so that when you come back you're contracted for life like a timeshare. Luckily for us, my witch fit got us home within 24 hours, wrote up their ridiculous demands for cancellation, and booyah'd right out of there. They tried to not refund us despite it all, and I threatened them with litigation, so they finally did. I have a scathing Yelp review about them that gets regular votes for being useful and funny. They recently tried to get it removed and failed. Suck it, you dirty, rotten leeches. I went to sign up at a Snap Fitness, and it said they'd charge a $50 gym enhancement fee every year. They said it would go towards equipment upgrades. I told them that's what my monthly fees should be going to. They refused to remove the fee, so I bailed and went to Anytime Fitness. They immediately proceeded to pull the same crap, plus the key fob to get in was going to cost me $70. You can buy a pack of 100 of them from Amazon for like $20. They too refused to budge on their conditions, so I backed out. Eventually, I moved to an apartment with an on-site gym, so that worked out for the better. I looked at renting a house about 7 years ago, and the homeowner had inserted some of her own clauses into the standard tenancy agreement. Now, this is absolutely fine to do, but they were purposefully put into different sections of the document, so if you read the part detailing security deposit, you wouldn't see her additions. She put them in another area of the paperwork. One clause was that no footwear of any kind can be worn inside the property. Failure to adhere to this means the whole property's carpeting must be professionally cleaned. Another was the waiving of the mandatory notice period before the homeowner can come by and inspect the property. There's supposed to be a minimum amount of time they must give you notice-wise before they can come over, unless there's a serious property fault, like a leak. So they can't just turn up unannounced. She wanted that waived so she could check we were treating her property right, and if we weren't, then we'd be immediately evicted as per the contract. I also caught her telling a relative that she registers eviction proceedings upon the start of the tenancy, so she can evict them as soon as she decides they've broken her rules. There was a mandatory waiting period between commencement of eviction proceedings and being able to actually get enforcement officers to evict a tenant. I'm not sure of the current rules on this anymore, as I don't have much to do with rental properties now. I noped out of that house really quickly and got a much bigger, cheaper house, albeit more of a death trap a few streets away. When did someone get wronged and burn it all down? I once attended a birthday party with a bouncy castle. The birthday kid and their friends kicked the younger sibling and his friend out, so they unplugged it and watched everyone's dismay as it deflated. Way to go, Mason. That was a pro move for a 12-year-old. I used to be into amateur radio after a short stint in the Army Cadets. There was this one guy in the East Midlands, UK, who was one of the adult instructors. He was always telling us about amateur radio and did hand out old or cheap pieces of tech he'd tried out and wasn't keeping. Anyway, he was a little weird, overly friendly with adults, he never had any bad vibes around kids. And obviously he had some social anxiety which he was compensating for. Personally, I suspect he was on the spectrum somewhere, but who knows. After I left the cadets and went to uni, I stayed in touch on Facebook. We were in the same Facebook group for amateur radio hobbyists. He always liked to do things by the book and instilled in us the importance of being responsible and socially conscious with our radio use. He was the same on Facebook, reminding people that Mrs. Miggins on her £10 handset wouldn't know about transmission power and squelch, etc. He mentioned in passing to a new member the importance of only using the public unlicensed channels, kind of like CB radio in the US, on the correct, very low power setting of half a watt. He mentioned it was because Mrs. Miggins trying to reach her kid in the next street wouldn't understand the idea that she could hear you, but couldn't reach you to ask you to be quiet a minute. He was correct here, and it's also a criminal offense to transmit at higher power on these frequencies, even though it's not enforced. Anyway, this got someone's back up and he was kicked from the group for preaching. After unsuccessfully asking to be let back in, he set up a larger antenna in his back garden, set up a super fancy aerial atop of it with a 30-watt transmission system. This is really powerful if you're wondering. And he now turns this on for several hours a day on whatever channels the radio club or group are using to teach them the importance of good etiquette. This means that nobody can use certain frequencies for hours at a time, as it just sounds like someone's having a one-way conversation on air. He could probably be arrested, but that doesn't seem to bother him at all. Yep, there are extreme hobbyists out there who do not give an F. Like they're more passionate about it than they are about their lives and families, and this kind of fanaticism is why you do not want to cross them. I worked in an office for a Fortune 500. One of our longtime team members, Gloria, worked as a level 2 employee for quite a while. She was good enough to be level 3 or 4, but never took the offer because she was a single mum, relied on public transportation, and a few other reasons. Her friend, Patricia, started at the same time she did and was on level 3, working up to a level 4. Patricia and Gloria were all good until Patricia discovered that Gloria made more than Patricia because she was constantly getting merit raises and performance bonuses. One day, Gloria made an honest mistake. Our client just switched to a different protocol for billing and she accidentally billed him in the old way. It was a no harm, no foul situation, but Patricia went to the level 4 employees and senior management and suggested that Gloria be fired. They all went to HR, who said that while there was no valid reason to fire her, they could move her to a crappier team that would basically guarantee her failure. Gloria realized what was happening and secured another job. We were going to be off for 4 days for Christmas, and Gloria quit Thursday by leaving an after-hours voicemail. Gloria knew that the message wouldn't be received until Monday morning, so she sent out an email to the entire building, timed to be sent at 11:59 Christmas Eve. The email detailed how Patricia was having an affair with her brother-in-law while her husband was deployed, how one senior manager took this job because he was fired for embezzlement and lost his certified public account license, and how one of our male level 3 employees requested a transfer because our married department manager was basically throwing themselves at him. We got in at 8, HR and IT got in at 9. It was a crap show Monday morning. Quite a few people quit that day, and to think it all could have been avoided. I've run into Gloria and Patricia since then. Gloria is thriving. She got a stern phone call from the company and they tried to withhold her last paycheck, but that was it. Patricia is, well, a little more humble now. She was going through some serious crap at the time, and while that doesn't excuse any of the stuff that she did, I think the letter was a wake-up call that she needed to fix her life. You know, this really could be applied to my soon-to-be ex-husband. He has mommy issues. He has daddy issues. He has sibling issues. Basically, his parents divorced when he was in grade school, and no one really ever parented him from that point forward. His dad left. His mum, in my opinion, has no sense of accountability and can never be wrong about anything, so not exactly a great role model. She restarted her career after the divorce and left him in the dust. My husband never really healed from the aftermath of his parents' divorce. I can understand. My own parents' divorce negatively affects me to this day in some ways, though my parents are the polar opposite of his. They're both extremely involved and giving. I think the more my parents involved themselves in our lives, the more he realized what a parent was supposed to look like. When our baby was born and my parents worked to be helpful and bond with him, I think it almost showed a giant magnifying glass on the abandonment issues he had buried and run from his whole life. He cracked this year, ran away with someone, threw me and my loving family away, but briefly got the attention he was yearning for from both his crappy absentee parents in his time of crisis. That attention didn't last too long. He burnt our marriage and the life we had built over 10 years to the ground. He felt so sad and wanted me to feel as badly as he did, though any warmth he enjoyed from doing so quickly dissipated. He regrets everything. Okay, late update. We've been separated for months, but within the past 6 weeks he's been trying to open the door. I've been patient with him and encouraging while he tries to find the right specialists. He called me tonight to tell me he's back with his mistress, so I guess he doesn't really regret anything. I need to redact that last sentence, I wouldn't want to be inaccurate. And just FYI, I was still in denial about having to get a divorce. It's stupid, but I wanted to work through some of this even though we couldn't stay married through therapy. Hold me accountable if you must, it's 100% done. My uncle. He was always the black sheep of the family, but it turned out he had been carefully planning his future from the start. He got a full ride to his dream college, got a really well-paying job, got married, and now has a child who's a few months old. My grandparents, his parents, always thought he was a disappointment as he was their only son. He knew this and they just bullied him for a while about how he never lived up to their expectations. Turns out his parents and all 4 of his sisters ran themselves into quite a bit of debt, and he only found out as he was nearly done with college. They came to my uncle for help after he found employment, and he basically gave my whole family the finger and said for them to help themselves. I'm literally the only one of any of my cousins or siblings who bothered contacting him years after this whole ordeal. At the time, I was too young to understand what the frick was happening, let alone travel by myself. So I contacted him via Facebook Messenger, and his wife is a lovely woman. His daughter is so cute and gorgeous, and he's still the same strong, kind-hearted man that I remember. My parents know I'm on contact with him, and they just don't care. I'll be staying over at their house for a little while next week, and I'm so glad I was able to meet my little cousin. I'm a behavioral interventionist at a middle school. My job is technically to pull disruptive students out of class, get them redirected, then back into their classroom. Most of my job is actually a sounding board and an understanding ear to the kids who struggle. My entire job is an example of that one quote, "A child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." The neglect and rough lives of some of these kids would break your heart. It's good to have people like you in that job who treat their role as a caregiver rather than as a bailiff or a punisher. A lot of very savable and deserving kids can get messed up by an unforgiving school environment. I guess my story would maybe count for this. I cut my relatives out of my life when I was 19. They'd spent all my life tormenting me and treating me like I was dirt. With me gone, there's my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother, and my dad. With my dad being the youngest at 58 years old now. There's no younger generation to take care of them. My aunt would be prepared for that, but my dad and my grandmother were banking all of their hopes on me caring for them in their old age. So much so that they'd make fun of me for how incapable I was of domestic tasks. For example, I didn't learn how to use a washing machine until I Googled it at 19. But when I asked them how to show me anything, they always made excuses. Your school should be teaching you that. You should know how to do that. Figure it out. I'll show you some other time. They never would show me though. They liked having evidence of what a horrible, incompetent, and lazy person they saw me as. They also didn't want me to be able to live independently because that would make it easier for me to move out, which would mean I wouldn't be at their immediate use. I also lied and said that I was required to live on campus for the first year I went to university. I wasn't planning to cut contact yet, but I was desperate for a taste of independence. My aunt gave me my birthday money early so I could afford the deposit. I felt awful because my aunt was actually the only one who'd ever stood up for me, but keeping in contact with her would have been too complicated, and I'm certain she would have put some pressure on me to mend things with the others. Not even a month after I moved into my student accommodation, I got into an argument with my dad and finally stood up for myself. I cut contact, and with that, I was expecting to become homeless once I finished my first year and my lease finished. I was too mentally ill to complete my studies and hold down a job at the same time. As luck would have it, everything turned out fine. A lot of bumps in the road, but I graduated, didn't end up homeless, and I'm now working in the healthcare system. I don't exactly regret cutting contact, but I'll admit I should have done some research on my options for homelessness instead of just hoping for the best. It nearly destroyed my life. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I burnt everything down in my last job as a rehab tech in a nursing home. I was treated poorly after a couple of months, my workload was doubled, and I was never listened to about my concerns. I begged them to hire a second tech, even just part-time so I could breathe and have my mental state not be ruined. They always told me no, and then piled on more work. They got mad at me when patients weren't complying. They ran me around like a dog for hours, cut my lunch hour for no reason, and refused to give me any sort of pay raise when minimum wage went up. I was at my wits' end, and everyone but my manager and therapist could see it. I also experienced a privacy violation that I wished to report to HR. I was basically forced to tell my manager why I needed to take a day off and for what medical procedure I was getting it for. Another instance, I was told I was clearly gaining weight by one of the therapists and my manager, and then they laughed about it. I was so mad that I put in my 2 weeks, but I could barely make it 2 more days. After one awful, busy morning, I packed up my stuff during my break, clocked out, and went home. I sent a text to my manager saying I won't be coming back, and then I blocked her. I felt bad doing it, but I had nurses and aides telling me to quit because they saw how miserable I was. About a week or so later, they went into lockdown because of COVID. Does anyone know the actual story of King Shaka Zulu? He was literally that guy. Shaka was born as an illegitimate son of a Zulu and was thus rejected by the Zulu settlements. He spent his childhood growing up in his mother's settlements and was then lent an army, which he used to take over the Zulu tribe. Cue one of the greatest but most intense African warriors and monarchs of all time. I'm burning down my community right now. That is, my neighbors are messing with me, trying to weaponize the bylaws of our HOA to construct a spiteful road on my property for their driveway. They're calling it fire safety. I call it 25 grand in unnecessary legal expenses. So I let my HOA know that if they allow this, if they don't stand up forcefully for me in court, then I'll use the same power to demand a 60-foot road down the entire HOA, literally forcing neighbors I don't know to move their homes. I'm being treated poorly, I feel unwelcome in my new village, so I'm enforcing my rights and burning down the neighborhood. It'll cost 25 landowners $1 million to make up for messing with me. Some of them may literally lose their homes, and afterwards their property values will be much lower. But I told them what would happen if they didn't support me. I gave them a chance. My God, this is about as toxic an HOA situation as I've ever seen, and we've read a bunch here. Surely your neighbors aren't going to commit if that somehow means you bulldozing down theirs and everyone else's houses, right? My brother. My family wasn't loving. I coped with it with my venturing out and exploring on my own. I'd leave early each day and explore nature, only coming home for food. My brother coped with the lack of love by meeting strange women, substances, fighting, parties, and stealing things. He had a really distorted view of needing love, and he really acted like if he wasn't getting love, then the world deserved to burn. He went to prison in his early teens. He got out in his 20s, tried to be good for a year, but couldn't find his concept of love, so he started burning the village again. Went back to prison, got out years later, tried to go clean, and this time found love. But he pushed himself too hard to be lovable. He developed a super personality built on crystal. He did substances to keep up, lost his love, started to burn the village down again. This last time, the local sheriff ended the cycle. He wasn't going to go back inside. During the road chase, they filled his windshield with bullets and he veered off a cliff and died in the dirt. It was the headline of the local news. I think I may forever compare my life to my brother's. How could we be so different? We had the same parents and endured very similar pains, but I didn't choose to burn down the village. I chose to distance myself and survive. He went nuclear. The village didn't have a chance. I worked at a very famous family-oriented company for almost 15 years. I was damn good at my job, but I refused to brown nose or play dirty office politics, so I pretty much stayed on my original spot for a long time. Because of this, I became a pretty regularly used advice platform for other employees on how to handle workplace issues, and because I valued my integrity, I never reported red flags to management, but I always encouraged the person to do so on their own behalf. Eventually, a few key people remembered how I helped them and circumvented the usual cronyism to bring me into their teams for big-name projects. It was a nice change and I appreciated the chance to stretch my legs. Then I started getting systematically bullied and harassed by the in-crowd who decided I was unworthy of being in their presence. I ended up going to therapy about it to help develop tools to deflect while desperately looking for a way out. Eventually, I got another job and handed a sort of manifesto to HR when I turned in my 30 days notice. Racism, people coming on to me, shoving, blatant favoritism, theft, all with dates, names, and supporting evidence. Basically an HR nightmare because they couldn't control what I did when I left, including going to the press. My departure gave them 30 days to ask me questions, interview me, whatever. But it never came. Thing is, I also sent that novel off to the EEOC. They opened an investigation with the company, and the moment they did, all heck broke loose. See, the people who were too afraid to come forward before now had an out. They weren't snitching, they were complying with an investigation per company policy. So suddenly, scores of people were testifying to HR about the horrific things they'd been subject to. Some people were fired, others were demoted. A few did get off scot-free, but I sleep like a baby now. I knew a girl a few years back who I think was a decent example of this. She was diagnosed with AD back in primary school and was shunned by her whole family because of it. As a result, she had low self-esteem and slowly grew a profound hatred for people, which resulted in everyone at school hating her, and as a result, her hatred grew more. After her 17th birthday, she ran away, but before she did, she'd spent about 5 years gathering dirt on everyone who had wronged her. She released it all, which resulted in her parents splitting and a bunch of other kids being expelled or getting into crap with their parents, and if memory serves me correctly, one kid even got disowned because of what everyone found out about him. She ended up running to a family friend of mine and is still working on rebuilding her life. It's a shame, because she's one of the nicest people I know and is a very honest person. Everyone just treated her like crap, so she burned it all. In December, I rage quit my job. My boss was losing her frickin' mind. I worked in a small office with about 8 or 9 people. In my time there, I saw 11 people come and go from various positions. One day when the boss and her sister, the vice witch, were out, employees all had a discussion about how bad the work environment was getting. Micromanaging, no autonomy or flexibility, it really wasn't a good place to be in general. We pinned it down to mostly being due to the behavior of the vice witch. One employee agreed to take one for the team and discuss it with the head witch. However, the head witch completely twisted everything that was said and took it as the employees telling on everyone else for having this conversation. She had individual meetings with each one of us. She blasted us about what was said, and she was insistent on finding out who started it. She didn't buy it when we all just said it was a fluid discussion that was had, not some planned meeting called by one person. After the individual meetings, we had a meeting with all of us where she told us it was absolutely unacceptable that we'd had our little session, and if we didn't like it, she'd accept our resignations immediately. She, quote, expected loyalty, and if we weren't loyal, we weren't welcome. We tried to reason with her in the meeting, telling her it was just some general concerns we had, and we'd agreed one person would present them to her, but she was having none of it. No solution for the problems that were making all of her employees upset. It was all about her and her sister. No concern for her indentured servants, as we called ourselves. I should have quit then and there when she said that she'd accept our resignations, but I didn't. I did start looking for jobs, though. I had an interview one day and I texted in sick. I'd quietly let one of my coworkers, who I thought I could trust, know about the interview. When I texted my boss, I got the response, "Good luck at your interview. I expect loyalty, not silly games." So I went to my interview. It went well. I didn't end up taking the job though, it wasn't a great fit. I got home and wrote up my letter of resignation and emailed it. Told her I wouldn't be returning and would have someone collect my personal items for me. In the email, I told her exactly what I thought of what she did. I was in the middle of a lot of projects. This was for an e-commerce company, so I can see a lot of what's being done by checking out the website. I can see a lot of stuff get stalled or restarted completely. It definitely set them back, and the person who I'm pretty sure ratted me out about the interview was running off her butt and had a lot of late nights at the office, from what I heard. I'm still friends with one person who works there, and who is desperately looking to GTFO. She said they now have daily affirmations of the boss's choosing that they have to recite 3 times daily. On Mondays, they receive a sheet of paper with the week's affirmations printed out. I only wish she had tried that crap while I was there. She would have gotten a piece of my mind. One of my best friends in high school had a few really crappy boyfriends. She's very bright, excelled on the debate team, and is really attractive. But her mum was a serious alcoholic, always getting into new relationships and then breaking up, which I think passed some attachment issues onto my friend. When we were seniors, she was talking about all the losers she had dated, been mistreated by, and how none of them were going anywhere in life. She said something to the effect of, "I'd love to be there when they inevitably get locked up for substances or attacking their spouses or both." She got a law degree, moved back to our town, and is now the county prosecutor. What does your crazy neighbor do that made them infamous? Mine threatened to put giant signs across the wooded border between our properties if my other neighbor got into another border dispute with him. This was after stopping my excavator from doing his job, which was finishing grading the lot so that we could plant grass, and then threatening said excavator if he got over the property line. He was 50 feet away from the line and not taking down any trees.
The neighbor finished his rant and then left without ever introducing himself. When he's not complaining to the cops about my neighbor, he's doing everything legally possible to annoy the cops themselves. I used to live in a little town of about 300 people where we had an elderly neighbor named Gladys. She'd routinely look near our garbage can outside and take the recyclable bottles and cans that we'd leave for her. After we cleaned out a fish tank, we put the gravel and fake plants in a bag and left it on top of the garbage can, because the can was already full. About a week later, Gladys hollered at me while I was outside to come over as she wanted to show me something. She had taken the garbage bag that we'd left and planted the fake plants along the side of her house. She said she wasn't really confident that they'd make it, but so far they seemed to be thriving. I could only nod and compliment her on her green thumb. She dug up my fancy flowers and replanted them in her own yard 15 feet away. Man, I felt this. My crazy neighbor took my new blueberry and raspberry bushes and stuck them in her yard. She replaced them with sticks that she found. I had a neighbor who'd sneak into my yard at night and roll up my sod. It would be laid perfectly the night before, but I'd get up in the morning and it would be rolled up just like it was when it came from the store. I finally got angry and spent the night laying by my back door with a baseball bat and a flashlight, ready to bonk the crap out of whoever it was. Sure enough, they came around 2 in the morning, and I stood up, turned the light on, and was face to face with 4 raccoons rolling up my sod, looking for bugs. I had a neighbor who wouldn't let anyone use his driveway because he didn't want it to get dirty. Anyone, including himself. He parked on the street outside. If he thought you were having a party, he'd come and drag plastic bags full of God knows what to the end of his driveway so no one could turn around in it. One time I came home and he was outside, hosing it down in the rain. To his credit, I've never seen a cleaner driveway. I wonder if this guy had the same ongoing need for clean concrete as one lady that the narrator used to bike past at 5:30 in the morning on his way to work. Every morning this lady would be on her hands and knees, scrubbing the pavement outside her house with chemicals and everything. My neighbor sits in his yard, hides behind his plants, and meows at people who pass by. He's not dangerous at all, but he's not right in their head either. His caretakers are his parents, and they seem to be very nice people. His dad once told me, he just likes to be a cat, and left it at that. I didn't ask any more questions. She has a penchant for going around sticking nails in people's tires at night. This has happened dozens of times to nearly everyone on the street, although she's slowed down since more people started installing video cams and motion sensor lights in their driveways. We used to have someone that would do this in my old neighborhood. We still don't know who the vigilante was, but one night someone camped out and waited for him to do it again and pummeled him and left him bleeding on the street. Cue the ambulance and cop cars on the street at 3 a.m. on a Friday. He eats my flowers. In his defense, he told us that he's been doing it for years when he introduced himself after we brought the house. He also brought over frozen cookies in a plastic bag as a housewarming gift, but I wasn't sure what was in them. We share a side yard and he really is a great neighbor. Just an older, quiet guy who keeps to himself and eats my flowers. Comes over to my yard, eats the lilies raw, or brings scissors and clips the heads to boil and make jam. I thought that his particular foraging was interesting and quirky, so I planted a couple of raspberry, blackberry, and blueberry bushes 3 years ago when we first moved in, on the side that we share. I told him to help himself to berries anytime, especially before the birds do. The bushes have gone insane, and the entire side of my house is now a summer berry haven for us to share. Having a decent relationship with the guy I share a property line with is worth some dead-headed flowers. You know, we had one a while back that had a crystal lab in the home. Crazy fights, yelling at all hours of the night, the guy would wander around the hood of his head, and once he threw a Molotov cocktail at the second-floor window at another guy who was smashing up his car, screaming, "I'll frickin' kill you, motherfricker!" Those were some interesting times. Our neighbor pulled us over pretending to be a police officer, saying that we'd somehow broken the law whilst pulling out of our driveway and that she was going to call it in. She isn't a cop. I considered using my dashcam video to actually call it in, but we'd just moved, and I wasn't sure if she was the type of crazy to burn the house down or attack my dog. After chatting with the other neighbors, it turns out she's just the wannabe HOA president in my neighborhood with no HOA. So mostly harmless, just very annoying. He was hopping my fence during the day when I was gone at work to use my backyard pool. When confronted, thanks to a snitch neighbor, he claimed he had an agreement with the previous tenant that he could use the pool whenever he wanted. Guess what? I'm not that tenant. I have a bunch of security cameras now. Well, I used to have a neighbor who was legitimately mentally ill, although I don't know his actual diagnosis. His truck wouldn't start one day due to a dead battery, and he told everyone on the street that another neighbor was stealing the electricity. He knew this because of the way this guy parked his vehicle. Obviously, it was sucking electricity from the ground for his battery, which drained the car batteries near him. Many times he had run down the street and warned everyone to hide their valuables because Japan was invading. He wasn't on substances, but he did take medication for his mental illness, and everyone on our street could tell when he stopped taking it. Whenever he'd start saying completely irrational things, we'd remind him to take his meds, and he'd thank us and go home, presumably to take it. He lived alone, and he was getting older, so I think he had a hard time remembering. There were many, many more incidents. My guy jumped in front of my car while I was driving down the road to yell at me for going through his trash at night. I told him it was probably raccoons. He refuses to believe it to this day. I used to live in an HOA. One of the members of the board lived across the street from my neighbor and I. He sent a letter to us saying that we all have to mow the lawn on the same day, at the same cut height, and in the same pattern to create uniformity in the neighborhood. My neighbor and I intentionally cut on different days and in opposite patterns just to annoy him. We have one who took my parents to court because he lost in our HOA chairman election. Some people just have too much free time. There was this one crazy woman in my old neighborhood who used to pretend she was a cop all the time. First encountered her screaming at the post office staff because she'd arrived past the pickup time and they couldn't guarantee her letter would be in tomorrow. There was almost an hour of her just pitching a fit while they opened the other counters around her. "Do you know who I am?" and all that stuff. Second time I encountered her, she'd cornered some poor child on the bus and was telling her she'd have her arrested because she was a police officer and she didn't like the way the kid was eating a bag of crisps or whatever. Real invective stuff. I stepped in and politely asked if the child knew this whack job, at which point the lady backed off. Anyway, I guess she saw me leave at my stop because I woke up the next morning to find my garden all torn up. Total weirdo. I was dog-sitting, probably about 16 years old. My neighbor charged into the house while I was there with a gat, pointing it at my head while on the phone with the owners of the dog, claiming, "There's an intruder! Real life ain't Call of Duty. I remember you, Daniel. Frick you. Seriously." My sister's neighbor reported my sister to the police because her kids were playing in my sister's garden. Not for the usual reasons like too much noise, etc. Nope. Because a volcano in Italy had erupted and the radiation would hurt the children. My sister lives in the UK. The next door lady standing on her driveway yelling at me because acorns have fallen from a large oak tree on my property onto said driveway, demanding that I cause the tree to cease and desist from this intentional criminal activity. Okay, thus far we have kind of a balance between the mentally ill and the people who are just intensely bored or lonely, plus a cocktail of these most likely. We can only really help that the former people get the treatment and understanding they deserve, but the latter really just need to get some damn hobbies. Years ago, in rural Arizona, we shared a pond with the crazy neighbor. More sad than anything, he was in his 40s and lived with his mother in around 1988. A Vietnam veteran, he'd walk out to our shared pond with a .45 and a box of 50 rounds. He'd then absolutely unload on the pond while yelling, police his brass, and walk quietly home. This happened every 90 days for about 3 years. This woman lived next to us who needed to have the police called on her at least once a week. She'd scream at her roommate at all hours of the night, go into a drunken and sometimes substance-filled stupor, and then scream at us while tripping out as we sat in our backyard. More than once I had to kick her out of our home because she walked in unannounced, beer in hand and drunk as ever. One time I called the cops because she was screaming about killing someone and rolling around on her front lawn. Another time I received a call at work, one morning as I worked the third shift. My girlfriend informed me they had to evacuate the house because the neighbor's garage was on fire. It turned out either she or her roommate had done it while doing substances or smoking in the garage. She ended up moving away but would still walk to our house to ask for our lawnmower. She wasn't happy when I told her to get off my porch. I cared for an elderly woman for many years. She lived to the age of 93 in a crime-ridden inner-city neighborhood by being as tough and nasty as any criminal living nearby. Her oddest actions involved her incorrect belief that she owned the road in front of her house. She didn't even own a car, but she insisted that nobody park there. She'd confront them if they parked in front of her house, and if they did it again, she slashed their tires in the middle of the night. Over and over for years. She was never caught, but everyone knew it was her. She only stopped when she lost the physical strength to slash tires in her mid-80s. Then she started using spray paint on the cars. "He don't park in front of my house no more," was all the justification she needed to damage her neighbors' cars.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
This older lady lives across the street from me and she's obsessed with leaves falling on her lawn, to the point that she'll come out of her house and pick up one individual leaf off the grass in the fall or any other time. She spends hours outside with the leaf blower in the fall. She'll go outside and knock on other neighbors' doors if she thinks that you have too many leaves on your grass, and then she'll come into your yard and do it herself if you're not home. What I think is weird is that she's in her 70s, no kids or grandkids living with her, and lives alone in a pretty big 4-bedroom house with an amazing in-ground pool in the backyard, with a slide and diving board and everything. Nobody's used that pool in at least 5 years, yet she opens it up every summer. Somehow, she likes my family and has never once yelled at us about our leaves and randomly brings things over like half-eaten gallons of ice cream and asks if we want it because she's not using them. The old lady who lived below me left me multiple cryptic letters blaming me for the birds chirping too loudly in the mornings. Not pet birds, the sparrows and things outside. This went on for months. Yes, for a brief period I did have a bird feeder. I took it down after a few months after multiple cryptic letters. Eventually, management got involved and took her side even though bird feeders were explicitly allowed as per the lease. There were several trees nearby, including one that literally hung onto both her and my balconies. I assure you that birds existed before I set up the feeder, just as they continued to exist after. My sister and brother-in-law took over the lease 4 years ago, and they still get occasional notes from the bird lady. Apartment management has even inspected their unit to verify there's no bird feeder or any other bird-luring devices. My friends used to live in a gentrifying neighborhood near the beach in my city. They had a regular apartment, but someone bought the building in front of them, which was beach adjacent, knocked it down and put up a few luxury homes. This crazy lady bought one. She had a 2-car garage and a driveway, and best we could tell she had 1 car. But no one was allowed to park on the street in front of her house, which was clearly marked as a public street and where other people had been parking since forever to go to the beach or because their building didn't have parking. We could see this street from their apartment. She went out and keyed any cars parked there. It took a while to figure out it was her, but eventually people saw her doing it. All the neighbors warned their friends not to park there, and people started putting up cameras to get evidence of it. Some guy with a piece of crap ugly truck started parking directly in front of her house every day just to mess with her, because he didn't care if she scratched it up. So she slashed his tires. It got to the point where every time she opened her door to walk outside, neighbors would cuss her out through their windows. One night, she went out in the middle of the night and painted the entire curb on that street red. Someone got it on video, several neighbors called the city, I think she got a talking to and a fine, and she had several insurance claims pending against her from damage to other cars, and she finally stopped. Everyone still hates her though, even new neighbors who had told the story from older residents. When I first moved in, my neighbor walked into the house unannounced. When my wife gets home, sometimes she wants to stay in her car having a phone conversation. The neighbor will come out and walk down the side of his house, checking his sprinkler controls, and look at my wife. He has 2 huge bushes he refuses to cut. It blocks our view backing out of the driveway. The fire department came by to clear trees and bushes around the fire hydrants, and he came out and yelled at the fireman, "This bush is older than you." Needless to say, I hope there are no house fires. We bought a house, and on the day while we were unloading the first truckload, the neighbor came into our garage uninvited and started telling us what trees on our property he wanted us to cut down. Not the craziest, but the frickin' audacity of some people. Well, nice of him to let you know what you were in for, and that you should probably avoid him going forward. At least you knew from that point on to brace for crazy and dive inside every time you saw him. We've had an arrangement with our neighbor for 20 years now that she can use our paddock to put her horses on. Well, she's getting up there in age, so there's been some long periods of time where she hasn't had horses on our paddock in recent times. We noticed some new horses there lately and just assumed that they're hers, except they're not, and they belong to this other crazy lady in town who, through town gossip, found out the paddock doesn't belong to our neighbor but belongs to us. So she goes around spreading a rumor that my mum tried to poison her horses, which is the first time any of us realize the horses aren't our neighbors. My mum then proceeds to inform said crazy lady that A. No, she didn't try to poison crazy lady's horses. B. There's nothing poisonous in our field. C. If she keeps spreading rumors, mum's going to call the cops. And D. If she ever puts her horses on our land again, mum's selling them or calling the SPCA for abandonment. Crazy lady then proceeds to become even more crazy and starts lurking outside our house, taking photos of us and our paddock, and then gets caught going up random people's driveways through our small rural town, taking photos of their kids. She's since been spoken to about this behavior by the cops, and it seems to have stopped, but damn, she is a weirdo. The stupid thing about this is that our actual neighbor is the one who has the crazy lady nickname throughout the town, purely because she prefers animals to people and comes across as a little impatient when dealing with them. But we've always got on well with her, she just isn't a people person. She stalks us. Like every time I get home, she'll walk outside and tell me I was either 3 minutes later getting home this time or that I'm 2 minutes earlier and then ask me why. One time, my friend and her sister came to pick me up. The neighbor was against her window with her hands and face pressed up on the glass, trying to look at who was coming to pick me up. My friend and her sister were so terrified they called me telling me to hurry up because a crazy lady was staring at them through the window. And I replied, "Oh, that's just the stalker neighbor." Yeah, it was a funny day. Not sure if this counts as crazy, but I have this neighbor who's part of a spiritual organization called Brahma Kumaris. Every time someone in the neighborhood is going through rough times, especially deaths in the family, she goes to their house and instead of offering condolences, she preaches about how they should join this organization and things will be better. She doesn't acknowledge anyone the rest of the time except the time when someone dies or a new family moves into the neighborhood, to whom she preaches and gives books written by leaders of her organization. Cult. Had severe anger issues and yelled at anything or anyone he didn't like on the street. A few years ago, he had a road rage incident, and when he started banging on the other car's windows, the occupants got out and beat him soundly. During this, he had a heart attack and now barely has enough mobility to walk to the mailbox and back, so he doesn't yell anymore. Okay, so R1 murdered another older neighbor lady, beat her to death with his bare hands. In the middle of our townhome complex. Well, it was actually her daughter and granddaughter that are my neighbors, but she was visiting them like she does every week. The next thing you know, detectives are knocking on my door, seeing if I know any information about him or the incident. The only thing I do know is that he was always arguing with other neighbors. I looked him up on Facebook after the detectives left, and he had posted he was going to kill her 30 minutes before he was going to do it. Took pictures of her car and her daughter's house and posted it on Facebook with her address saying, "I'm going to get the B word." And then it happened after the post. Got the red-headed old B word. It's just crazy to me that at 5:30 p.m. in broad daylight, just a couple of yards from my door, he killed someone and no one saw it happening. My neighbor was an 85-year-old widow that lived alone. She had 2 vehicles, a car and truck, and over the course of a few months, I realized that she was no longer parking her car in the garage like she had for the many years prior to that. Then suddenly the truck wasn't being parked inside the garage either. Turns out she no longer had room in her garage to park her vehicles because she was walking down to a residential construction site about a block away every evening, and she had grabbed 2 2x4s and bring them home. She had over 500 boards stacked in her garage, and when she was questioned on what she was going to do with them, she didn't have an answer. Oh, and some bonus crazy neighbor stories. I drove 16 hours straight, pulled into my drive, and crashed on my couch immediately. I must have left my garage door open because I woke up to the neighbor lady shaking me to see if they'd missed my newspaper delivery that morning as well. The neighbor lady thought I didn't clean up after my dog in her front yard. I've never owned a dog, so she retaliated by walking around the neighborhood with a garbage can, picking up every bit of dog doo she could find, and dumping said bag onto my front lawn while I was standing in the front window watching. Ran up over $300 on 1 month's water bill of mine because the neighbor lady was hooking her sprinkler up to my water when I'd leave for work in the morning and would let it run all day until right before I got home from work.
She'd put up an ugly orange snow fence between our yards in the fall to keep my leaves out of her yard. Me pointing out that I only had pine trees didn't dissuade her from the decision to leave the snow fence up. And day one, I should have known something was fishy with this lady. Literally day one. I closed on my house at 9 a.m. and had a roofing company at the house waiting for the call that I closed. We spent the day ripping off the old layers and getting bundles up on the roof for the next day. It was hot out, we were exhausted and all sitting in the front yard cooling off, when neighbor lady walked out of her house, down the sidewalk to my house, and without even acknowledging the six of us staring at her, and she walked in the front door and had herself a look-see. She hated dandelions. I found this out on the first year that I lived there when I noticed that my lawn was dying off in an extremely weird way. Almost as if someone was spraying weed killer on the stream setting trying to snipe dandelions from 20 feet away. That's literally what she was doing. And being the nice guy I am, I'd clean her driveway off in the winter because I had a snowblower. She'd never thank me in person, but instead she'd come over to my house after I'd finished and would leave a bag on my front doorstep that usually contained whatever expired goods she had in her pantry. Some of the standouts for me were like a dozen cans of 10-year expired Chef Boy RD, and once half a bag of wheat flour. What terrible person or rule finally made you believe in true evil? I'm a nurse. Walked into a hospice patient's room full of family fighting about inheritances and the will of their dying relative, and one of the visitors called me back into the room and asked me if there was any way to speed the process along. She asked if things would go faster if they put a magnet over the patient's pacemaker in an effort to deactivate the device. She went on to explain that they were from out of town, they'd bought tickets to a live show, and were worried about missing it. Basically, it was taking too long for their family member to die, and it was ruining their evening. All of this was within earshot of my super sweet patient. My blood was boiling. I'm not a gambler, so I don't know if these are all over the place, but the only time I've ever been in a casino, I saw a cash machine that would give you an instant second mortgage on your house. This was in Reno in 1989 at a family reunion. I stood there looking at it and realized I was standing in front of evil incarnate. Civil asset forfeiture. 25 grand was legally taken from my grandfather who has Alzheimer's but wasn't diagnosed at the time and couldn't tell the cops why he had that much money on him. It was to buy a new truck. He had forgotten. The cops just took the money and left without any charges being filed. We didn't find out until a year later when the cops sent a receipt of seizure to his house, and we found it when we were cleaning. Couldn't do anything about it because the police department already spent the money. A company I used to work for went bust because the owner was staying sloppy drunk and gambling all the money away. He came in one Monday morning and told everyone to pack up their personal stuff and to just leave. I gave my notice a couple of months earlier and actually received my vacation pay and final paycheck. Nobody else got another dime, and payday was supposed to be Wednesday for the last 2 weeks. I felt really bad for everyone except my piece of crap boss. He interviewed at my new company, and when they asked me about him, I suggested they not hire him. They didn't. A serial sewer relative of mine was at her best friend's funeral and was in the funeral procession when she just stopped her car suddenly. The parents of the recently deceased were in the car behind her and bumped her bumper from behind. And you know how slowly those processions drive. The woman sued the parents for back and neck injuries and won. The last postcard we got from this woman was a picture of her dancing it up in Greece. Her family won't even let her come to visit on their properties anymore for fear that she'd fall and sue them. What a piece of work. Yep, like we all know that these sorts of lawsuits in the US can happen because you guys don't have public healthcare, but my god, it's a system that lets some real monsters just litigate to exploit everyone. What a psychopath. I sell car parts. I'm a very small player in a fairly niche market which contains a couple of other small players and 2 big ones. One of the big players collapsed, owing a lot of people money. It's very unfortunate, it happens. The administrators were called in and the owner issued an emotional message on Facebook saying how sorry he was, sickness in the family, very sad, etc., etc. But not to worry, the business has 400 grand in new stock on the shelf and the administrators will sort it all out. But later, it turns out that he knew he was about to fold but continued taking people's money, even though he had zero intention or capability of supplying them. Then he transferred the second-hand parts of the business into a new business, which his father opened in the same name, at the same address. The new business also scored the website. Then he somehow worked out a deal with the administrators whereby the $400,000 in new stock was purchased by the new business for $14.5 because the new business would not give the administrators access to the website to identify any of these specialty parts. He apparently intends to go back into business, but since all the people he owes money to are going to get pennies on the dollar, it would be incredible if anyone trusts that family again. This is more corporate evil than anything else. We're a small business making super specialty products. Had a customer put down $30,000, take delivery of our product, then turn around and say, "I think it'll be cheaper just to sue you than pay the remaining $30,000. Of course, I thought, no way. We have all the signed paperwork and everything. 3 months later, he got to keep our product without paying us. What were the effects, you ask? Well, due to the various legal fees which we had to carry and the fact that down payments go to suppliers, my partners and I had to open up our own personal bank accounts to keep the company afloat. All of our employees got paid, but we owners had to forego our salaries until it was settled. And because word gets around, we had to deal with that too. Total bullcrap. We could have sued him for breach of contract, but what I learned through this process is that if it's less than $1 million at stake, you're going to spend more on legal fees than you'll ever recover, and it's not worth the time. The whole thing was really eye-opening. On top of that, he was using the equipment to generate profits at the same time he was claiming defective goods under the UCC. It was a complete fraud top to bottom, and there was nothing we could do about it. We literally found his products in stores and everything. I have no idea how that guy can look at himself in a mirror. My piece of crap uncle who sued his 74-year-old mother. Long story short, but my uncle lost the case, but it left my grandma in serious debt for the rest of her life, and he couldn't care less. I know that feeling. My grandfather was a CEO of a local steelworking company back in the Second World War era, and during the war, the need for metals skyrocketed and his company ended up making a crap ton of money. He sadly passed away in 2013 and left his wife, my grandma, his daughter, my mum, and his son, my uncle, about $600,000 each. My uncle burned through all of that on stuff he didn't need, 4K TVs, etc., and got himself a brand new high-end SUV kind of car, then another car, so on and so forth. Come May of 2016, he'd burned through all of his cash on useless crap and bullied my poor 90-year-old grandma into giving him more money from her share that's supposed to be for her retirement fund. Sometimes he threatens to self-delete if she doesn't give him X amount of money, exploiting her love for him to buy more crap for himself. My ex had a long list of mental health issues stemming from years of horrible treatment as a child. She's tried to self-delete several times. Twice in the 3 years we were together. Her parents have admitted her to a local clinic. She spent 3 days there. I was so shocked at what qualified as help, it was more like glorified babysitting. She came out feeling no better, but now hit with a $15,000 bill. $15,000 for 3 days of supervised TV and reading, with 2 sessions with a psychiatrist to evaluate her. That's not including the overnight stay at the hospital and ambulance, which insurance covered most but not all of. Oh, and the kicker? After her stay, the doctor prescribed her medication. $3,000 for her prescription. We thought the Walmart employee made a mistake. She ended up going to a different doctor who thankfully helped her out big time. Mental health needs to be made more affordable. She was 19 at the time and already hit with a huge bill to add to her school loans and car payment. One of my friends owes almost $50,000 in student loans that he doesn't remember even taking out. The reason he doesn't remember taking them out is because his school, which was a for-profit college that has since closed, convinced him to sign a document when he first enrolled at age 17, which essentially gave them the right to take out loans on his behalf in order to pay his tuition. They didn't really explain to him what the document was, they just got him to sign it amongst a flurry of paperwork. The school then took out several private loans with an exorbitant interest rate, and my friend just started getting letters out of the blue the year after he graduated. When he was in school, whenever these loans would show up on his student portal, they were named a confusing code number like X4357545HFY5 or something like that, and classified as financial aid. So he thought he was getting educational grants. Apparently this has happened to a lot of people, but he was told that there was nothing he can do about it, especially since the school has now closed. I'm not sure about the precise legality, but he's contacted multiple entities to discuss it, and all of them said there's nothing he can do because he signed a contract willingly. This doesn't feel like it should be legal, but the attorneys say that there's nothing they can do. He even spoke to someone who works for the private loan company. The representative felt really bad for him, helped him drastically reduce his monthly fee to a payable amount, and said that the same thing actually happened to her. She owes $10,000 and there's nothing she can do about it either. Oh my god. There are just so many ways you can get financially destroyed in the States that are either outside your control or just con schemes disguised as legitimate enterprises that are really nasty about how they trick you. It's absolutely horrifying and seems to be able to happen to anyone who can't afford an accountant on call. A cop started lecturing me after 10:30 at night for being in the park. Park curfew was 11. He kept me there until after curfew, then gave me a ticket. That's entrapment if I recall correctly. My best friend had 2 kids with his wife, and said wife then left him for her very rich boss. She and the boss wanted custody of the kids, so they used the boss's wealth to basically bankrupt my friend in legal battles. Every time the court was leaning towards a joint custody ruling, they'd introduce some new evidence or delaying tactic. Then they knew if they just kept dragging it out again and again, he'd run out of money and give up, which is eventually what happened. Now he has very limited access to his own kids, and such access as he has is routinely denied and ignored by the ex-wife because,
what are you gonna do about it? Do you want a legal battle like last time?
A neighbor getting evicted for not paying her rent 1 month while she was in a coma in the hospital. The apartments had a super strict policy that you had to pay by the 5th online, and that if the company didn't receive payment by the 13th, including fees, they'd start the eviction process the same day, and if the amount, now including lawyer fees, wasn't paid by the 17th, you were out on your butt. I used to run a software company. I had a digital agency hire me to work on a banking contract they had, and they were losing due to their rubbish offshore development team. I went on site to the bank to save the contract, finish and deliver the software, which took just over 3 months of work. Over this time, the agency kept dragging out my invoices, paying small bits and pieces, and always saying they'd pay tomorrow. After the contract was done, they declared bankruptcy, didn't pay me, and bought the rights to trade that bank contract off the debt collection agency. They started a new company and worked that contract. Since I spent 3 months working for free, it sank my business and I had to close it. Patent trolling. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A good friend of mine has trouble keeping work due to his mental illness, which is very mild autism. Fully competent, he just can't navigate the politics of most jobs. He was on job seeker payment between jobs. As part of this, he has to attend regular appointments. Talks about what interviews he's had, etc. And he recently missed an appointment. The night before, he was rushed to the hospital, and at the time of the appointment, he was lying in a table having surgery. But he hadn't told them at least 2 days before, so his payment was cut off. 2 days before, he wasn't aware of any issues, let alone ones needing surgery. Legal guardianship. Essentially having someone, either professional, family, friend, petition the court to make decisions for you. There have been cases of seniors having people show up at their door, told them they have the legal right to make decisions for them, and send them to nursing homes. Guardians can tap into their bank accounts and essentially liquefy them to nothing. All of this is legal with barely any court oversight. Google it. There are horror stories abound. Not a personal experience, but extending copyright because you want to keep profiting off of stories that you didn't come up with. Now look, Disney does make some damn good movies, but they're a horrible corporation and have, because of their copyright madness, left a massive dent in the world. I get their desire to protect the mouse, I really do, but the fact that they're ensuring nothing will ever enter public domain again to do it is unacceptable. Ticketmaster's existence is proof of true evil. A buddy of mine had a court case, I showed up for moral support, and I saw the most racist bullcrap I've ever seen. The cop had pulled over 2 young black guys for no reason, pulled his weapon on them and yelled at them to get out of the car and walk backward toward his. He put them in cuffs on the back of his car, searched their car, found nothing, so he wrote them tickets for walking on the highway. That's what they were in court for. The man explained to the judge, "He forced us to walk on the highway, he was pointing a weapon at us." The judge found them guilty. It still makes my blood boil. Companies artificially raising the price of life-saving medicines just because they can. Bonus if they market it as a good thing for the people they're potentially killing. My buddy married this girl he met in college. He majored in comp sci, she did vocal performance. He earned a scholarship, she took out loans. They married, he paid off her loans, they had 2 kids, he bought a house, he was the sole breadwinner of the family, she stayed at home all day and watched the TV. She didn't clean, cook, or help him out in any way. Her family were jerks to him and pressured her to leave. She did. Now he pays massive amounts of child support and alimony, She lived off him for years and now he owes her money. Cops giving out cell phone driving tickets to little old ladies who don't even own cell phones because the cops have to meet ticket quotas. Yes, Your Honor, I did see her hold up a phone to her ear, I swear under oath. I was adjusting my hearing aid, Your Honor. I don't even own a cell phone. I'm on a very meager income and I can't afford one. Sure, you were adjusting your hearing aid. Fine stands, $350. Man, these are just getting more and more evil the further we go, huh? I'm not sure I want to proceed. What's absurd is how many judges are just approving the awful stuff that cops are entrapping people for. It's insane. What's their angle? NSF fees. You don't have enough money, so the bank charges you lots of money. Similarly, payday loans. It's really expensive to be poor. Repealing net neutrality. Whatever happened to California coming up with its own net neutrality laws? Did the federal government kill it, or did the leaders of the movement get covertly taken out themselves? My sister's boyfriend, now ex, gave her a black eye and broke her finger. She pressed charges, but he got his lawyer and pressed bullcrap charges back, so it would be too expensive for her to fight it. She ended up dropping the charges because she couldn't afford it, and he knew that. I'm working at a very fancy hotel in Europe, and a few weeks ago there was a big conference of all the biggest asset management firms, like Wells Fargo, BlackRock, and the like. They booked out a whole floor and had literal backroom meetings. 5 to 8 important guys from different companies would sit together in a locked, emptied-out hotel room for 30 minutes and do business. Remember, these are all supposed to be competitors. Only they could leave and enter. When one meeting was over, they'd mix up and meet again in a room to talk. This was happening in 20 rooms simultaneously for 3 days. They also had lots of ominous packages delivered to their rooms. I don't know what was going on exactly, but it was shady as all hell. Multi-level marketing companies. Most distributors don't even make money and are then told that they're the problem. Not the business plan or product price or quality. Upline on plans that aren't available to the public are held up as models of success. You're encouraged to value only friends and family who are customers. If your loved ones tell you the truth, they are apparently jealous haters of the success that you haven't achieved yet. My elementary teacher took half of my recess away because I sneezed during quiet time. Eminent domain. My great-grandfather worked hard to buy a 10 acres of land near what was then a small town. Then he spent his life watching the town grow and legally steal his land bit by bit for expansion purposes. By the time he died at 94, he was left with barely a quarter acre, mostly taken up by his house. The Supreme Court in Brazil insists on doing this kind of stuff constantly. Last week, they were deciding if they'd release a lot of criminals arrested by the car wash operation because they don't like the operation cleaning Brazil from corruption. Then 2 justices voted in favor of releasing 23 criminals. One of them justified the vote by saying he was worried with the prisoner costs for the state, and the other one justified his vote by saying the jails had already got too many prisoners. The first one who was worried about how much a prisoner costs for the state was caught calling congressmen a few days earlier to force them to increase the salaries of the Supreme Court justices. By the way, there's a bill in Congress right now extinguishing all kinds of prison sentences for criminals in Brazil. They're doing this bill to save their butts because a new government was elected to start in 2019, and they fear that this new government will send them to jail for stuff they did over the preceding years. American medical insurance companies determining that curing people is too expensive. Insurance companies denying long-term acute care benefits to patients who paid extra to have said benefit. If you're a doctor and you work for insurance companies, you're a frickin' piece of crap and everything wrong with medicine, and you've sold your soul. No doctor who dedicated their education and life to medicine should ever choose to be in a position where they receive bonuses for saving on denied care. Ever. That's when you stop being a human and a benefit to mankind. Martin Shkreli patenting and raising the price of life-saving medication. Man murders his girlfriend, dumps body in creek. Family searches for her for almost a year. He's convicted of manslaughter and gets only 5 to 7. Court forces the victim's mother to bring his children to visit him in prison. He gets out and gets custody. I didn't witness this per se, but I heard about it later in life since I was too young at the time. My father had started a cleaning business which was taking off. He'd clean carpets and do janitorial work in large industrial buildings. One of his biggest clients didn't pay him for a while and ended up owing upwards of 80 grand. My father then stopped working for them and kept insisting on getting his money. He stopped insisting after he showed up at the building one time and had a weapon pointed at his face. Apparently the building belonged to some mafia, and the guy who'd pulled a weapon on him said he'd kill him if he showed up again. My father proceeded to sue them, and they ended up winning after a long court battle because they obviously had the resources to afford amazing lawyers. My father then had to declare bankruptcy, sell the house, and ended up starting from zero again in an apartment building with my mum and I, 2 years old. This is mostly lawful evil, I guess, or illegal masquerading as lawful. I used to work for Quest, with a W, who were bought out by CenturyLink. A guy bought a no-frills landline for about $10, no long distance, no caller ID, no anything, just a landline. Why? Dial-up internet, of course. Only he failed. He called his ISP from his modem and left it on for an entire month. Turns out it was a long-distance number. He didn't know. What happened next was a $25,000 phone bill. Now, this is your average Joe working a regular job who has a tiny home. The guy has worked in an extra $10 into his budget so that he could have the internet. It's the little things in life. Only now, he's drowning. He made 2 payments of $500 apiece to try to take care of his bill, but he'd never be able to pay the whole thing off. He called me begging and even crying for help. How the system worked is whoever waived anything took a penalty. It didn't matter if it was a mistake or legit, waiving anything gave the employee waiving a penalty. And it was a sales job. Not to mention that $25,000 couldn't be waived by anyone but upper management. Nobody was willing to waive his bill, even though he'd already paid $1,000 towards it. The fact is, the company wasn't out any money. The infrastructure was already in place, they would have made a profit on his just paying his monthly bill. But nope. The way the corporation saw it was that he owed money, and therefore, no matter how it would destroy his life, he had to pay it back. However, that wasn't the main motivation. The company could write off that loss as a loss, and as such, his defaulting on his debt is more valuable. What can you do? It's currently happening to me. I've been the registered care provider for both of my parents since I was 14. I'm 34 now. My parents passed within months of each other. Well, I lived in a council property, that's UK government housing for all of my American friends, and I've been given 28 days to vacate the house I've lived in my entire life. They are under absolutely no obligation to rehouse me, and the extent of the help they can offer is the number to homeless shelter charities. When my mum died, I attempted to update the tenancy to my name, but my dad took ill before I filed the paperwork, and I was told I'd need to file different paperwork to account for his illness, which was dementia. The fact that I've lived here for my entire life means nothing, and I doubt it helps me that the housing officer completely hates my guts, but that's another story. So yeah, homeless at Christmas, and all because I had the nerve to care for my parents but not list myself as a tenant. When did saying, "If you don't like it, then leave," backfire spectacularly? A former industrial job I used to have said those words verbatim during an all-hands meeting. We were understaffed, underpaid, and overworked, and everyone knew it. Instead of the 2-to-1 ratio of 2 machines to 1 operator for safety reasons, we'd have 4, 6, or 8, because people were getting paid less than most retail jobs to bust their butts in some of the most disgusting work I've ever done. You'd come home covered in moldy coolant, metal shavings, and stink. Machines started breaking down because they'd never shut them down to perform maintenance on them, so we'd often have massive problems, which of course meant even more overtime to make up for the broken machines, and people started quitting. Management's response was to tell us that they expected us to work harder, because they couldn't get more help in. One of my co-workers, who generally gave no Fs, asked in front of everyone in that room why they didn't try raising the bad wages and see if they could entice people that way. The response was, "We're not having that conversation right now. If you don't like it, you can quit." Oh, buddy, was that the wrong thing to say? As soon as word got out to the other shifts, what can only be called a frickin' exodus began. We lost half of each shift within the week. I stuck around for a couple more weeks until I had a conflict with my schooling at the time, since one of my classes got out about 30 minutes before my shift, 30 minutes away. So I warned them in advance that I might be a few minutes late one week, maybe. And I got told that I needed to decide, what's more important, your school or your job? So I quit, and I giggled my butt off at the sign in the HR office that said we had an almost 80% turnover rate. Never did find out what happened to that hellhole, but I can't imagine anything good with losing that many people. The poor HR rep seemed like she was just so frickin' done with everything, and seemed so apologetic as she took my badge. Every year, the military has this event they name the Warrior Games. It's like the Olympics for men and women who were injured while serving. I'm a decent cyclist, so I was elected to represent the Marine Corps team in that event. I'm not sure where they hold the event these days, but the year I was selected, they flew us out to Colorado Springs. When I got there, I quickly realized that 99% of the Marines competing were still active duty. I'd retired a few years prior, so it was weird being around Marines again. Almost immediately after arriving, the senior leaders and officers in charge began demanding that I get my hair cut and to shave my beard. At first I laughed it off and thought they were joking. Turns out they were quite serious. The lady who was in charge of the Marine team was a major, and she took me off to the side and ordered me to get a haircut. I reminded her that I'd retired a few years prior and was no longer required to abide by active military grooming standards. Then a light bulb went off in her head, and with a smirk she said, "Well, you either get a haircut or you can go home. Your choice." So I smirked back and said, "Guess I'm flying home." They'd already pre-purchased our airplane tickets, so all I did was call Delta, explain what happened, and the lady on the other end transferred my ticket to a flight home the next day. I'd taken a few weeks off work to attend this event, so I just went back home and enjoyed my time off with my hair and beard. It must be an absolute mindfrick to a higher-up in the military when they're told no by a supposed subordinate. Like, this is an environment of near total obedience. There are stories of people crashing their ships in the Navy because they were told to hold the course by their ignorant officers. So having a guy just going, "Okay, thanks, bye, F you," must have been a jolt. When I was a kid, I stayed at a friend's house for the weekend. My friend's mother was one of those parents who, at the dinner table, required their kids to eat everything on their plate come hell or high water. I'd been served way too much food and said that I can't eat it all. The mother said to me, "You can either finish your food or leave the table." I promptly left the table. This totally blew the minds of my friends and his siblings. It had never occurred to them that leaving the table was actually a viable option. When my mother picked me up the next day, my friend's mother told her what had happened and said I was the rudest little boy. I think my mother was actually quite proud of me. My boss said, "If you don't like it, try finding a job like this one with better pay and benefits." So I googled it, and now I've just had my 14th year anniversary at the new job. It's twice the pay and insane benefits. My great-grandmother is notorious for being a mean old witch. It was Thanksgiving at her house, and much of the extended family were there. She started harping on my mum's cousin for something, like she always does, and my mum's cousin was like, "Grandma, can't we just have a nice dinner for once?" And great-grandma was like, "If you don't like it, you can leave." And every last cousin, aunt, uncle, and all of their food disappeared to my aunt's house. They later put Grandma in a home because they were tired of taking care of her when she was so viciously mean to her own children. She's still in the home, age 94. I had an insufferable supervisor once, and we'd have these 15-minute pre-shift meetings. The guy would just stand there and lord over everyone for the duration and talk about how bad we were doing. The phrase, "we suck," was one of his favorites. Finally one day, he's really on one and summons the testicular fortitude to say, "If you don't like it, there's the door." His second-in-command got up and said, "Frick this," and walked out. The guy stood there stunned for about 5 seconds and then ran out the door after him. He later ended up having some mental instability and quitting. The second-in-command is now the supervisor. I survived all these meetings by default assuming he wasn't talking to me. My husband worked at a really toxic job for a while. As staff got fired or quit, they weren't replaced to cut costs, and instead the remaining 2 employees were worked to death. Finally, the owner, who was a crappy boss and terrible businessman, called a meeting with the 2 to try and force an attitude adjustment. The employees tried to be constructive and talk about things they saw that needed to be improved upon to make things work better, and of course, this egotistical jerk owner wouldn't have it. He told them that if they couldn't handle the expectations, then they were free to leave. So they did. Both of them left immediately and never set foot in the store again. I don't think the owner was expecting that at all. He expected them to grovel and beg to keep their jobs and thank him for the opportunity to work 70-hour weeks under his tyrannical rule. My husband called me after that meeting and was so upset he could hardly tell me what had happened. He was terrified. He was so sure I'd be angry at him for quitting his job when we weren't really in a position that I could support us. I wasn't mad at all. I was proud of him for not taking the crap that was being doled out to him and doing what was best for his mental health. He's a damn good man and he deserved better. Back in the mid-90s, a coworker was under a great deal of stress. He was performing a low-skill role in a high-skill industry during tremendous crunch that was very important to the company. Entry-level stuff. More a job that's a stepping stone than a career. Despite that, he was an integral member of the team with institutional knowledge and background that couldn't be replaced overnight. Actually, it couldn't be replaced at all, as it turns out. During a team meeting to go over status, progress, and stuff, he asked our boss for some help as he was overwhelmed and simply couldn't keep up anymore. The boss said, "If you can't handle, there's the door." The guy just stood up and without a single word he walked right out. The boss ended up having to do his job until completion of the initiative. My sister had a habit of picking fights with people, and when it wasn't going her way, she'd tell them she was removing them from her life. She's done it to boyfriends, longtime friends, sorority sisters, and she's done it to me twice. The first time I rolled my eyes because she's younger than me. After the second time, my sister told me, "I'm removing you from my life, you're toxic," and unfriended me and told the family I was toxic. In reality, I just wasn't letting her be toxic, selfish, and under the influence of whatever she was on with, to me, my spouse, and my kids. So naturally, she decided it was a good idea to threaten us. I said, "Okay, fine." Per her usual routine, after a few weeks, she came around and wanted to pretend she'd never said the things she said. I didn't respond. She claimed it was all a joke and she had a right to be in my kids' lives. I haven't spoken to her in 2 years. I honestly don't miss her drama, and it was the best decision for my family. It highlighted how bad the generational dysfunction was in my family, and how it was expected to just overlook bad behavior and people please for everyone else's comfort. I realized that I didn't want my kids to repeat that cycle. I vowed to always put them first. I'm not popular in my wider family right now, but I've never been happier, and this was the first year I got to enjoy holidays without having panic attacks or dread. When someone walks out of your life, let them. Nobody has a right to be in kids' lives. I don't even think all parents deserve to be in their kids' lives if they behave badly enough. I don't really have any mad aunts, but I know they're a whole thing, and most people that have them would leap at the chance to never see them again. I worked at a Thai restaurant. The owner's daughter, who was manager, left town for a couple of weeks, and we realized once she left that she was stealing our tips and tipping us out way less than herself for over a year of working there with her. When she got back, we confronted her at the end of the night during her shift, since she refused to meet with us in an official group meeting, and the 4 of us servers called her out. She said, "If you don't like it, then get out or sue me." We were all 18 to 20 years old and didn't really know what to do, so 3 of us quit on the spot in that moment and walked out the door. I'll never forget the look on her face. My lecturer wanted us to have an extra class online after the exams because we'd missed a lesson during the semester. We asked him if he could at least move it to the afternoon, but he insisted it be at 9 a.m. So everyone logged into Classroom, but only 2 people were answering his questions. He then decided to take the register and everyone was present. Then he said, "I'm not forcing anyone to be here. If you don't want to participate in the lesson, go." Everyone logged out immediately except for me because I'd gone to the bathroom, and when I came back I found him calling for my name. He later logged out and sent me the PowerPoint for the lesson. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I worked third shift at Walmart, the management tried to change a shirt policy overnight. They all of a sudden decided that we had to wear the blue collared shirts and not the blue t-shirts anymore. One of the managers, named Jackie, who was a total witch, came up to my 2 friends and myself and told us that we had to go buy new shirts right then or go home. So we left. The frozen and dairy products that we were stocking didn't get done that night, and we got to go home and play Destiny all night. Next day, they never said another word about our shirts. Screw Walmart, by the way. Unless you're a World of Warcraft raider, this probably doesn't apply, but I've been in a number of raid formations, especially back in the day, where the raid leader announces some wonky loot rules that disproportionately benefit himself or his close friends. And then he'd say, "If you don't like it, then leave." And then, everyone bails. I used to be the co-owner and station manager for a small online radio station. We were all digital, so I rarely met any of our staff in person, and we were online 24/7, so if I was awake, I was pretty much always working. We had a dedicated team of assistant station managers, about 6 of them, in charge of various things, and we'd have once-weekly meetings with me, the assistant managers, and the other co-owner. None of us were paid, this was strictly a volunteer gig. It cost the co-owner and I money to keep the station on the air, but it was a labor of love. At one point, I began to get close to one of the assistant managers and we started dating. The co-owner of the station got jealous, I think, and began to give him crap about his work, demanding that he redo graphics and coding over and over and over, even when it was perfectly fine. He laid into the assistant manager at one of our weekly staff meetings and I lost it. I told him that he needed to stop his behavior or I was going to walk. "Fine," he said. "This is my station. If you don't like the way I run it, leave." So I quit on the spot, as did half of the assistant station managers, then a large number of the DJs. Within 2 years, the whole thing had to be shut down because no one could work with my former co-owner because he was a petty tyrant who had to have things his way and couldn't let people live their lives. I've never felt such petty glee as when I saw their off-the-air blog post. My mother is well known for her Christmas, Easter, or whatever holiday tantrums. She threw a particularly good one when I was about 14 and yelled the infamous title line. My uncle and aunt piled themselves, their daughter, and myself and my 5 siblings into their 4-wheel drive. We all left to go to their place, picking up KFC for lunch on the way. I don't know what kind of Christmas my mother had, but ours was pretty good in the end. I'm so glad we didn't get pulled over, though. I was the whistleblower at my workplace. I witnessed my manager mentally and physically mistreat a 101-year-old woman. I worked in a care home. I raised the alarm, and staff above the manager didn't deal with things quick enough, and over worry of a bad name, because press had gotten a hold of the story, they were trying to keep it quiet and were going to allow this manager back to work on a final warning. We were a small team, about 8 of us. When they told us that, all of us reached into our bags and threw our notices at them. It was all of us or her. A week or so later, and them paying her £15,000, she was gone. The worst thing is, we were a charity home. She basically got thousands and thousands of pounds for bullying a vulnerable elderly woman. Something like this happened to me in my previous HOA, about 15 years ago now. We were at a board meeting in the HOA president's unit, and he was power-tripping and trying to illegally use his power to bully a particular owner he didn't like personally. When the rest of the board wouldn't go along with what he wanted, he basically said, "Fine, I quit, get out." We did and reconvened at my unit, where we quickly decided to do the appropriate thing. Older people can be quite the jerks in my experience. New management was hired and took over scheduling from me, who was covering for a now-gone manager, without understanding any of the intricacies of scheduling. After 2 weeks, we had an all-staff meeting to address grievances based on her incredibly poor method of scheduling, and she refused to back down, dropping the famous ultimatum. Out of a staff of 40 or so employees, I think maybe half a dozen stayed. Is anyone else out there just sort of listening for the vicarious joy of quitting a crappy workplace? I feel like I dreamed of doing this sort of thing every day in any number of my service jobs. Well, I wasn't there for this one, unfortunately, but my high school English class had this scenario. The senior advanced placement English teacher was notorious in my graduating class for not really giving a damn about a lot of the students. From the way I was told, they were going over quizzes, to which the teacher started going over some vague subjective response and how it was wrong. The students started arguing, and the conversation came full circle to where the teacher started agreeing with the students. Once he realized this, he started backing off that answer and correcting the students again, causing more frustration. This resulted in a student saying, "There's no point in learning this if we're wrong even if we were right at one point." Well, if there's any of you who don't find this valuable, you can stand up and leave the classroom. 2 of his 28 students remained. I was absent because I was sick, but what a sight it would have been. I had a teacher pull the old, "If you don't want to behave, you can leave my classroom" on a classmate. The whole class got up and left. Things hadn't been going well in this class since he'd started teaching us. The main problem was that he was a really bad teacher. Like, he seemed to have no knowledge of his own subject, history, or at least was incredibly bad at transferring his knowledge. We didn't have any respect for him, and he tried to keep us in line by being extremely strict, but in an unfair way. He wouldn't let anyone ask questions anymore because he could never answer them. He screamed at students if they quietly asked their neighbor for a pencil, that sort of stuff. I don't remember what my classmate did that angered that teacher, but it was something minor. We were all fed up with him, so when he told my classmate to just leave, we all did. Felt rebellious and like I was part of a bigger plan or something. It was great. We got into trouble for it, but also the teacher got fired, so it was worth it. Had my first job as a massage therapist. My friend from school also got a job there. The business was taken over by this lady who decided to also hire her friend, who hadn't even graduated massage therapy school. The owner's friend would start sessions way earlier than necessary if the clients got there early, which meant that sometimes my friend and I would sometimes have to scramble to get ready for couples massages with her. For example, my friend was still commuting and was a few minutes away, and the owner's friend tried to start having the clients get ready. It was frustrating because we'd have no time to talk to the clients before the sessions like we were supposed to. One day I politely told her that my friend wasn't there yet, so she'd have to wait to put the clients on the table until he was actually there so he could talk to his client. She got super mad and told the new owner I was being rude to her. Well, the new owner clearly got a different story to the truth and started texting me telling me I was in trouble. I didn't even find out what the actual issue was directly from her, but I knew it was because of her friend because of how quickly it happened, after I told her friend to wait to start that session. I tried to set up a meeting in person to talk about it, but she kept refusing and said we could talk about it over text. I decided I wasn't going to deal with that unprofessional behavior from a manager and walked in to tell her I quit. Turns out my friend also quit that day because of her friend's nonsense. The business owner was left with her unlicensed and uncertified friend and a stand-in that was extremely unreliable on a really full schedule. When I was in high school, I was part of an FRC robotics team. The coach decided that nobody who missed a practice during the last week of the season would be allowed to attend the tournaments. Of course, the band class had a mandatory concert during one of the meetings. So when I brought up that I wouldn't skip the graded band concert, the coach gave the ultimatum. About a third of the team got up and left, including all of the captains. The coach backed out of that really quick. At an off-campus college party, the host, a tenor voice major in the music department, started playing Wagner and Verdi operas at full blast. When those attending asked him to play something else that they'd all like, he said, "You all need to learn to like opera. If you won't give it a fair try, you can always just leave." And with that, everyone left. Grade 8 language arts class. To preface this, I was never an aggressive student, and generally the teacher's pet. The person who, if a teacher was away for the day, would be tasked in their notes to the sub to be able to assist and give them directions. 25-odd years ago, shortly after the definitive tragic school weapon tragedy at the end of the 90s. This context is critical to the story. Middle of nowhere, Alberta, a small country school. So our regular teacher was out for the day and had left a note directing the sub to ask me if she had questions about what had been covered. The sub comes in, reads notes, and opens the teacher's weekly planner. Then begins writing our words for the weekly spelling test on the board, except she opened the wrong week. Instead of the current week, she had opened the prior week. At this point, being the goody two-shoes that I was, and much to my classmates' dismay, although our teacher would have corrected us when she was back, so it wouldn't have helped them anyway, I raised my hand and politely informed her that I believed she'd gotten the page wrong, as we'd previously covered this material. What happened next I couldn't make up. She lost it, started ranting about how teens in general and me specifically were a danger to her, how she didn't know who were her friends and her enemies in the class, we'd never had this sub before by the way, how she had every right to fear for her life. She then capped it off by saying she was the teacher, and if we wanted to think in her classroom, well, there was the door, we were welcome to leave. I was never a popular child, as you can imagine, so I wasn't really expecting one of the popular kids, and my sometimes bully, to stand up collectively with everyone else, pull me to my feet, and have everyone walk out. Now, I mentioned above that we attended a small country school. There was no place to go, so we just sat in the hallway until the principal came down to chew us out for not being in class. The sub was gone by the start of the next period, and the principal taught the rest of our teachers' classes that day.
When did a surprise party result in disaster? In high school, I was responsible for keeping a friend busy while her parents set everything up at their house for the party. We get back to her house, all lights are off, she walks in the door and announces, "Oh, I have to take a huge dump." The lights turn on. Surprise! Embarrassment ensues. The person we were throwing the 63rd birthday party for was coming back from a trip with his wife, and we, 50 or more people, were in the backyard with all of the decorations set up and food. His wife texted us when they were 5 minutes away, and we all gathered to the fence gate where they'd enter. The fence was about 7 feet tall, so you couldn't see anything over it. When they entered, we all yelled, "Surprise!" and his face looked like he was about to sneeze, but instead he was having a stroke and ended up in hospital for the evening. The food was good, though. A girl I was dating in high school set up a surprise birthday party for me, but chose not to invite most of my good friends because she didn't like them. Well, they caught wind of this party and took me out for some drinks instead as their own birthday surprise. This was before cell phones, so she didn't really have a way to get in touch with me to make up a reason to get me back to her house. Halfway through the night, one of them spills the whole story, and I decide it's wise to make a rather late appearance. It was very awkward walking into a room full of her drunken friends with her crying in the bathroom, needless to say. My friend's birthday, thrown by his wife, he was recovering from a horrible car accident and was on crutches and horse-sized doses of Vicodin. He walks in and everyone yells, "Surprise!" And he slowly turns, looks at everyone in a doped-out state, and walks right back out without saying a word. One time, my mum told me that we were running low on funds, so we couldn't have a birthday party, and that the best we could do was take me to McDonald's with my friend. We'll call him Jack. We get to Jack's house, and Mum tells me that he's out at his pool. I walk over to the gate outside, and 20 people jump out and are all like, "Surprise!" I'm confused as all heck. I walk over to Jack and ask him if he's ready to go to McDonald's, and my mum had to pull me off to the side and explain it was a surprise birthday party. I'm not a smart man. Well, you know how sometimes people can be so dumb that it's sort of adorable? This is one of those moments, I feel. Good thing your mum was here to help you navigate this societal minefield. My friends, family, and co-workers planned a surprise party for me at my house. In order to give everyone time to get there and get set up, my co-workers had my boss ask me to stay late at work because we might have an emergency project to do tonight. So 5 p.m. rolls around and everyone heads home, really to my house. I sit around. 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Finally, I text the boss that I'm headed out unless she really needs me to stay. Turns out she was supposed to have me go home at 5:30 because the project didn't pan out. Since I figure my evening is shot anyway, I head to the grocery store, pick up the dry cleaning, drop off the recycling, among all my other chores. I walk into my door between 8:45 and 9 p.m. to find all of my friends, family, and co-workers drunk in my house. They were all a bit out of it to muster a coordinated surprise, but I figured it out. I ended up having a blast anyway. My friend got back from deployment. It was my job to take him out and keep him away whilst they prepared his house. We arrive, everyone jumps out, the friend reacts automatically, punching someone in the face and throwing himself out the door at the same time. 2 chipped teeth and a sprained wrist. I went to one of those surprise parties where more and more people show up to a restaurant until the whole party is there. Fun stuff, right? Turns out that a couple who were in our group of friends were in the same section having the divorce talk. And the thing is, they hadn't been invited because they fought so much that it was tough to be around them.
And look at this. Our friends are having a party that we weren't even invited to because we're such a miserable couple. What more proof do we need?
Nice. I went out for a romantic dinner with my then wife. She was being unusually flirty, showing a whole bunch more chest than usual, went to the restroom, brings back undies in her handbag and gives them to me, says she couldn't wait to get home, etc., etc. So we arrive back home. She tells me to meet in the basement where we have our entertainment room and TV while she changes into something for the evening. Well, needless to say, I'm rigid as hell. Go down the stairs, start taking off my pants. Surprise! About 30 friends in the basement for an early surprise birthday party. I fell backwards on the stairs, could feel my heart racing, and barely covered my fortunately rapidly deflating eggplants. You know what? I'd rather have had the intended evening's activities. I didn't even end up getting any birthday whoopee. We threw a surprise party for my brother's 30th. We did such a good job planning that he didn't even have any idea it was for him. My sister's birthday was about 10 days before my brother's, so we told him we were throwing a surprise party for her. Since it was before his birthday, we figured he wouldn't suspect a thing. He didn't. We actually had him in on the planning of his own party, asked him for his thoughts on food, drinks, among other things. We had all of his best friends, the entire family, minus my sister oddly enough, and he walked through the door and we yelled, "Surprise!" "You idiots! I'm not my sister!" He looks around and sees all of his friends, and a few seconds later it finally registered. He was so grateful for the awesome party and he had a blast, but his initial reaction made it feel like the biggest failure ever. My boyfriend at the time and his female friend planned a surprise for me while I was at work. I was definitely surprised and overjoyed that all of my friends were at my house with cake and balloons and wine. However, after a while, I noticed that I couldn't find my boyfriend or his friend anywhere. Caught him on the porch making out with the girl who helped him set up my surprise party. He forgot I had a security camera pointed at the front door. That was not a good surprise.
It's my party and I'll cry if I want to?
My friend was having her art displayed at a local coffee shop. She had no idea that her artwork was being displayed and thought she was just meeting a few friends for coffee. There were a ton of us and we all waited anxiously as she walked in. She walked in saying that her dad ruined everything about 2 minutes from the shop, texting her, telling her that he wished he could have made it to her art unveiling. I have a relevant story. My friends planned a surprise party for me, and they sent out a Facebook invite with specific instructions for everyone to bring funny hats and surprise me at this local bar. Then one of them accidentally invited me to the Facebook event. My girlfriend did the same thing. It was a surprise party at a karaoke bar, and they didn't turn the privacy setting off. So scrolling down my newsfeed, I found the damn event. Sweetest thing ever. I played along as I could until I realized she was missing half my buddies. So I went and invited them. I let them know ahead of time of her mistake and to play along. We arrived at the bar, I act surprised, buy her a drink and tell her later in the night, and she falls laughing off the bar stool. Still the sweetest thing anyone has done for my birthday. My buddy, who does way more judo than people should, flipped his girlfriend clean over during a surprise party and broke her arm. Thought she was an intruder. Needless to say, they're married now. Was that needless to say? I think there was an equal or greater chance of that being an immediate breakup or coma. That said, I'm glad it worked out in this case. Maybe she saw him as demonstrating his value as a family defender. A few years back, we threw one for my Uncle Tommy. It was going to be at the Elks Club where he was vice president or some dumb crap like that, so we all got set up and ready to go. We were waiting and they were supposed to arrive at 6. It got to be 7:30 and we were getting worried. Turns out my aunt was taking my uncle to the park for a romantic walk and then she wanted to take him to the club and he'd be shocked as frick, but they got into this huge fight and he wanted to go home. Eventually, she did convince him to come. The excuse was that he had left his hat there and it was an expensive hat. She actually had to steal his hat in the middle of the night and drop it off at the club, so the excuse would have the truth to it. And when he walked in, he said, "Yeah, I heard her talking about this 3 frickin' weeks ago. I told the C word I didn't want a party, and here we go, a frickin' party." He knocked all the presents off the table, punched the cake, and left. He filed for divorce the next week and then moved to Florida. One of my friend's girlfriends was throwing him a surprise party at his house and invited a bunch of us. An hour or two beforehand, someone posted on her Facebook wall, "Hey, what time does the party start again?" Needless to say, the birthday boy wasn't very surprised, but at least we all had a good time. A girlfriend of mine punched her aunt in the face, broke her nose because she jumped out right in front of her when they yelled surprise. One hospital trip later, they decided not to throw surprise parties anymore. Mine was more of a I wanted to be a huge jerk moment. It was my birthday. I told my wife, let's have the friends over for barbecue. She says, okay. I spent afternoon mowing yard and setting up the patio. About an hour before people were supposed to show up, my wife said I needed to help her run to the store to get supplies. I was filthy, covered in grass and dust, sweaty as heck, so I said, just let me take a quick shower. She says we don't have time because she needs to start cooking, to take a shower when we get back. Okay, I reply, slightly irritated to have to run to the market dirty, but no big deal, right? Did I mention she's all dressed up? Well, she seemed to be dressed really nicely for a market or barbecue, but I didn't really think much of it. Hop in the car, head down the road, she's driving. We pull into an upscale restaurant parking lot. I'm like, what the frick? Then I see all of my friends' cars parked in the parking lot. Frick. Did I mention I was dirty and sweaty? Well, I was dirty and sweaty and smelly as hell. I wanted to be a jerk and throw a complete fit and go back home, but I didn't. I spent the evening in a nice restaurant with my nicely dressed wife and friends while I looked and smelled like absolute crap, pretending to have a nice time.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
My aunt had set up a surprise 40th birthday party for my uncle. Everyone, about 30 friends, neighbors, and relatives, were hiding in the basement waiting for him to come up from work. His car pulled up, he runs to his house, everyone yells, "Surprise!" and he literally craps his pants. Turns out he'd had the runs that day and really had to go boom boom. We all had to wait until he got a shower for cake. I was 9 at the time and couldn't stop laughing. Parked in the driveway because I'm dumb as frick. He pulled in and asked what the frick I was doing at his house. He figured it out and I ruined the surprise party. I was delivering a hot tub to a customer. She had bought it for her husband who had been over in Iraq training Iraqi police. She wanted it to be a surprise for him. She had me arrive exactly 10 minutes before his party. Everyone was on the back deck but me. I had my trailer backed up with his brand new hot tub and was in the process of unloading it for them.
He walks through the door and everyone shouts happy birthday about the same time I popped the strap on the hot tub. The strap releasing made a loud snap followed by a heavy boom as the tailgate released. The man was suffering from PTSD. He screamed and dove back through his door, knocking his wife into the cake, and he just lay there, curled up bawling like a smack addict in rehab. My buddy's girlfriend threw him one at his apartment the day before his birthday. Everyone got in their places when we saw him pull up, waited and waited, then looked out the parking lot to see why he hadn't come in yet. He was getting a down-under kiss by some other girl in his car. Then it got awkward. When I was a DJ, the wife had planned a 45th birthday surprise for her husband. They'd rented a banquet hall, a lot of food, maybe about 150 people. The husband walked in, people yelled surprise, and he got this shocked look on his face and went off on his wife, accusing her of cheating and so on. "If you can hold this kind of secret from me, then who knows what else you're doing behind my back." There was a big commotion after that. I packed up and left. There was no further party. My younger sister decided she wanted a surprise party for her birthday, so she went ahead and planned it all herself. Cake, balloons, everything. The best part was the reveal. She walked into where everyone was waiting for her early and shouted, "Surprise!" I think whether or not she's a complete narcissist on the level of Lucille Bluth kind of rests on how old this kid was. If she was like under 13, this is just a cute, silly kid thing. If she's your younger adult sister, then it's a bit nuts. A buddy of mine set up a surprise party for his fiancée. She thought he was off to another state for a week for work. He came back early on her birthday and set up a huge surprise party for her at home. She usually gets home at like 6 p.m. from work, and it was already like 7 p.m. And we finally hear her coming, so we turn off the lights, and she comes home hammered with another dude she was going to take to the bedroom. Drama was all over the place. It was a huge chaotic argument, people were taking sides, my buddy was really angry and faked that he was calm, and then jumped like a cheetah. He moved out of his seat and decked the guy in the face and knocked him out. The guy deserved it. He was a pickup artist and knew she was engaged. She was just an easy catch, but still at fault, I suppose, and they ended up breaking up. Apparently, I'm so utterly oblivious that my surprise party was ruined numerous times in the weeks leading up to it. My girlfriend had set it all up weeks in advance and invited my friends, family, even co-workers. Every single group at one point or another slipped up and mentioned the party in front of me. I honestly had no clue. The day before the party, my brother was in town and had hinted that we'd have a great time tomorrow night. My girlfriend apparently cringed. Everyone was sure that I knew, but no one directly asked me. Luckily, they didn't. I was blown away when I got to the party. No one believed that I didn't know. Oh boy, I'd been talking to this girl I met through friends on MSN. She lived in the same town as me and we'd talk every day. Not on the phone though. Supposedly she was afraid of talking on the phone. Before I go any further, yes, she was real. Anyway, I kind of started to like her, and evidently maybe she did too. I say that because I got a call from her best friend. She told me that this girl always talked about me, yada yada. She invited me to her friend's surprise 16th birthday party. I came early, met her parents, her brother, her friends, and some of her extended family. They all said, "Oh, so you're John." So we get the word that she's on her way. We close the doors and hunker down. She comes through. She seemed really happy up until she saw me. She started crying and wouldn't talk to me. She hid in the back room and wouldn't come out until I left. I still don't understand. "Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe you're just really, really ugly." One of my roommates last year had a girlfriend who was ultimately sweet but very clingy, controlling, and an alcoholic. She decided to throw a surprise birthday party for this roommate, who we'll call Kay, and had been planning it for an entire month beforehand. She invited all of his friends, recruited me and the other roommates to help decorate the apartment and fix some food, had posters and a banner printed out, and baked a huge elaborate cake. The day of the party, he came home 4 hours early. The girlfriend was absolutely crushed and spent the next half hour screaming at him about how he had ruined everything. We finally convince her that all is not lost and finish decorating while Kay sleeps. A note about Kay: at the time he worked nights at a bar. He normally slept during the day and was awake at night, but today he had been asked to work a double shift for some reason. When he arrived home the next day, he had been up for at least 24 hours straight. Anywho, a few hours later, the guests arrived and everyone was having a good time, except for the girlfriend, who was still distraught that the surprise was ruined, and Kay, who was asleep. The girlfriend gets outrageously drunk and spent an hour or so trying to get Kay out of bed to enjoy this party that she threw for him, and he wasn't having any of it. When she finally manages to drag him out of bed, he pounds a few shots, we sing happy birthday, and he passes out again. The girlfriend at this point gives up and passes out on the floor of his bedroom. So the rest of the night was spent partying with these people we didn't really know and then cleaning up. We left most of the decorations for Kay and his girlfriend to take care of in the morning, which they never did. The monstrosity of a cake the girlfriend made sat in our fridge for a week before she remembered it existed. In short, alcoholic plans surprise birthday party for her boyfriend, the surprise is ruined, both boyfriend and girlfriend pass out not 2 hours into the party, and never clean up. Oh boy, my time to shine. My mum was having a surprise party thrown for her 30th. They flew in the whole family, her parents came, the whole shebang. On the way home from work, she was driving on a mountain road and was hit head first by a truck. She was driving a VW Beetle. She was helicoptered to the hospital, needed emergency surgery on her back, and when she woke up in the hospital, they were trying to get her phone number to call the family. She couldn't remember it. So a house full of people were waiting for my mum for about 2 or 3 hours, and eventually she remembered the number. She was completely bedridden for 6 months after the incident. Crazy stuff. When I was 13, my mum's then-boyfriend wanted to throw her a surprise 40th birthday party. My job was to keep her out of the house after work or school long enough for him to set up everything and for everyone to arrive. I told her I wanted to use my saved-up allowance to take her shopping for a new purse. We were leaving the store, and as we were walking to her car, 2 men rushed by us and took off with her purse. She was happy with the party, but her worrying about having to cancel her credit cards and stuff put a damper on the occasion for sure. Okay, that is the most unique one we've had tonight. We've had people getting shocked and attacking people, relationships ending, a mixture of both, but this was the first time the surprise was ruined by a random criminal operation. I didn't see that coming. Mine was fairly simple as far as these stories go. The guest just wasn't surprised. We threw a surprise party for a co-worker of mine. When he came home, he was really sick and threw up black barf on his cake before passing out. Haven't seen him since. Last I heard is that he'd ingested alien goo or something. He probably ate some bad prawns or something. I worked quite hard at planning a surprise party for my best friend in the flat we shared. Her boyfriend was to bring her home at a set time. We were all sitting in the living room with our eyes on the front door, waiting for her to enter as we'd seen his car go by. All part of the plan, except he brought her in the back door. She walks into the living room, and all of our backs were to her, and she asked what we were doing. When I asked him why he brought her in the wrong door, he said it was because parking was better on that side. Idiot! Guy walks in with his pants open, stroking his Johnson. The lights go on, someone jumps out screaming, "Happy birthday!" The guy was scared crapless, pulled up the zip, jams it on himself and screams in pain. Everyone else jumps out and screams too. Everyone is screaming. My ribs hurt from laughing. Female friend of mine threw a surprise party for her boyfriend, 4-year relationship, and invited all of his close friends and some of her own friends as well. He was at his mum's place having a mini party with his family, whilst we were all waiting at their place, where he thought that they were just coming home to get ready and go out for dinner. We'd decorated the house with really awesome stuff, bought a DJ to play music, and brought really nice food. 3 cakes, one made by his mum, one made by her mum, and one bought by one of his friends. There were some quite expensive presents there as well. It was all adding up to be an awesome night. The guy then realizes that something's going on, and after 30 minutes of texting, he tells her that she should just F off, since she knows that he hates surprise parties, and that he isn't going to show up, and that after that he's just going to go watch a football match instead. He checks himself in on Facebook at the match 20 minutes later, ignores everyone's calls and messages, and about an hour later, we were waiting and eating some food since we weren't going to waste all this awesome stuff on this jerk, he shows up after half the people have left and breaks up with her. Yeah, he was a D-bag. Why did you get blocked by a famous person on Twitter? I asked William Shatner if it was true that he's a jerk, and he said yes, and then blocked me. I respect both of you in this situation. Alec Baldwin blocked me after his alleged parking incident. He tweeted something about getting out to vote, and I wrote back that parking was a little tough at my polling place, but I'm sure I can find a spot amicably. My sister was blocked by Ryan Murphy because she said something bad about the writing of Glee. It's still crazy to me that a show that established in the first episode that it was a parody of high school dramas and musicals so quickly turned into the thing that it had parodied. I was blocked by the UK celebrity Mel Kershaw on Instagram. All she did was post promotions and adverts for stuff she was being paid for. It never once said promotion, so I mentioned it in the comments. Blocked. Was blocked by both Chris Brown and Famous Dex because I tagged them in memes about domestic crimes and stuff. I didn't get blocked per se, but back in the MySpace days I told Ice Cube if he was in my area he could come smoke a doobie with me. He replied, "Don't do substances," and then unfriended me. I have a friend who was blocked by Smash Mouth for implying that the lead singer and Guy Fieri are the same person. He then sent a cease and desist letter to the radio station they work at. Sensitive guy, that Guy Fieri. I was banned by Tito Ortiz. He got himself trapped inside an elevator and didn't appreciate me telling him his head was too heavy and he should have taken the stairs. You know, Piers Morgan didn't like it when I reminded him of the time he intercepted voicemails on Nigel Haver's phone so he could print stories about the guy's dying wife. Oh, Piers Morgan. You know, I think if we ever get enough money and ink to release a fully illustrated dictionary, we should have his picture printed as the definition of the word slimy. Every story I hear about that man has made me detest him just a little bit more. My friend got blocked by Dr. Phil on Instagram because she commented "daddy" on one of his posts. I'm blocked by Tyler Oakley, the YouTuber, because in 7th grade I tweeted, "I don't even like Tyler Oakley," and I'm guessing he searched his own name and blocked me. My sister got blocked by him because she tweeted something about him not having a career anymore. I was blocked by Dolly Parton after I asked if she was related to the Dalai Lama. I was blocked by Dan Schneider back when iCarly was still on air for criticizing a blog post he made. I never even liked that guy even though his shows were my childhood. I was heavily involved in the fandom for his shows, mostly Drake and Josh and iCarly back in the LiveJournal days. He made a LiveJournal account and started posting in the communities, and everyone freaked out. He was essentially forced out and made a blog on WordPress or something instead. Great shows? Creepy dude. I'm an attorney and consulted with someone who wanted to sue Twitter after they banned her account from comments to LeBron James. Boy, was she mad. Calvin Harris blocked me and I still have no idea why. I've never even tweeted him or tweeted about him. I asked Sean Price to block me, so he replied, "Done," and then blocked me. Rest in peace, Sean Price. I, along with half of Australia, have been blocked by Will Wheaton. Apparently he used a block list after arguing with some Australian columnist or journalist and blocked everyone who follows her. I was blocked by AVXRY because he was calling someone toxic, and I proceeded to link him a 20-minute video compilation of him being toxic. He's a Fortnite streamer who has a reputation of being toxic, in case you didn't know. I got blocked by North Korea's state news Twitter, which was the only Twitter North Korea had at the time, because I mentioned that Kim Jong-il was the dictator with the best fashion sense. Kurt Schilling blocked me for congratulating him on making the Hall of Fame. Blocked by Mike Doty, who's a musician and former frontman of a band in the 90s and noughties called Soul Coughing. The band broke up and most of the members hate him, so he's really bitter about soul coughing songs. He did a lot of substances too, so I think soul coughing in general brings up a lot of bad memories. He tweeted that he was reminiscing and listening to soul coughing songs and how they were all crap. I replied and just mentioned that I had really fond memories of rocking out to soul coughing while I was working at Subway in high school. And he replied asking me if I wanted him to feel differently. Weird response, but I replied again and said something to the effect of, "Oh, absolutely not. You feel how you feel and that's fine. I'm just pointing out that people tend to be their own worst critics." I was blocked. No crap, like 2 months later the guy released an album of him covering soul coughing songs solo. It was so dumb. The guy owes 90% of his fanbase to the success of soul coughing, and when he went solo he covered their stuff all the time. It bummed me out because I was a big fan and just wanted to be supportive. Blocked by E.L. James for questioning her book's authenticity and portrayal of the alternative bedroom culture. Blocked by Kirstie Alley for questioning Scientology. E.L. James is terrible. She has the audacity to send her lawyers after writers who are putting out works that are, quote, derivative of the 50 Shades of Grey series, which she is absolutely milking dry, when the only reason her series exists is because she so blatantly plagiarized Twilight. I never thought I'd stand up for Stephanie Meyer, but E.L. James did her so wrong. My cousin was blocked by Drake after commenting on one of his Insta posts, "Why do you write songs about women not wanting you when you're exactly the kind of man women should avoid?" I got blocked by Taylor Swift by tweeting her a picture of me 35 times. "Oh, she was okay with 34, but you crossed the line with 35. Somehow I was blocked by Marlee Matlin. I'm a big fan of hers, so I thought that was strange. I noticed when I saw I wasn't following her and thought I was, so I followed again and it wouldn't allow it. Eventually, I tweeted at her agent or publicist or something and asked her about it. I never got a response, but she did end up unblocking me. Not Twitter, but I got blocked on Instagram by then Patriots receiver Brandon LaFell in 2015 for commenting, "Brandon the Ball LaFell out of my hands." I was blocked by Bill Cosby for tweeting at him, "Block me if you committed the unspeakable act against all those women." Deadmau5 blocked me when I called him Skrillex and asked him to DJ my 8-year-old son's birthday party. I mean, why would you block someone for that? I honestly think I would have been delighted by the viciousness of that one. When someone with that big of a following feels sore enough to block one of the untold millions writing to them on social media, it has to be a devastating burn to them personally, right? Oh boy. Recently, I was blocked on a Facebook page of a UK company. The company stole the art of a small Canadian artist and used it for their company name and logo. When called out on it by the artist herself, they said she must be confused as they have an XO after the name. Side-by-side comparison of the original and the logo are exact. When she asked again that they stop using it, they threatened to sue her for slander. Myself and others found their Facebook page and called them out for stealing art. Blocked. Girl Gang Liverpool is their name. Pretty crappy of them since they're supposed to be a makeup company run by women, celebrating and uplifting other women, and they steal art from a female artist. Coors' Twitter account banned me because I wrote how grateful I was to them to be able to drink a bowl of Coors Light each morning on my drive to work. This is pretty funny. Jenny McCarthy tweeted out an open-ended question about what people look for in their ideal romantic partner. I responded, "Someone who believes in vaccination," and blocked. A guy got blocked by Colgate for tweeting them, "You know, it's teeth paste." I tweeted a picture of a burnt hot dog to Ryan Reynolds and asked if it looked like Deadpool's member. Blocked. No regrets, though. Mark S. Brownlee was blocked by Gal Gadot because he noticed that she used an iPhone to tweet about how good Huawei phones are. For a while, I'd use Snapchat to face swap myself with Trump and do my impression of him. I'd share these impressions on Twitter and tag him in the posts. One day, I come to find I can no longer tag him. I was blocked by the President of the United States. I've since been unblocked because of that judicial ruling about freedom of information or whatever. Getting blocked by Trump is too easy. The man has a thinner skin than a shaved grape. I got blocked on Twitter by Myers Leonard, the backup PF for the Portland Trailblazers, for telling him he was a waste of cap space. Then I sent him the screenshot of me being blocked by him to him on Instagram, saying it was nice that he finally got a block this year. I mean, my mum rarely uses Twitter other than to tweet the museums, and she wrote something about an art piece which Kanye West hearted. She blocked him. I got blocked by Alex Jones when I responded to one of his tweets attacking one of the Parkland kids with, "Why are you so obsessed with these kids when you can't even see your own?" Freshman year of college, when we all hopped on Twitter, I still had a regular phone, not a smart one, I guess. Anywho, I usually browsed via the web and mostly followed people I knew and actually interacted with. I opted for the text version of Twitter, since I wouldn't always have my laptop on me and the phone browser was garbage. I ended up following a few celebrities somewhere along the line, and I decided to unfollow Marlon Wayans as he had a fair number of tweets going out that I just didn't find amusing. The way text Twitter worked is that you could text the number after you had set it up and it'd tweet for you. You could also give it little codes like the AD at the front for a direct message. I thought I could just tell it to unfollow Marlon Wayans by writing "Stop at Marlon Wayans" and a few other variations of that. Unwittingly, they did go out as tweets and he saw them. I wish he'd just blocked me, but no, he roasted my avatar, and, well, we know how the internet works. I had to stay off Twitter for a while after that. My old roommate got blocked by Amy Schumer when he tweeted that he didn't think her Netflix special was very funny. That's all it took.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
CJ Nitkowski mocked a lot of, quote, nerds for critiquing Buck Showalter on his decision not to use Zach Britton in the late 2016 AL wildcard game. He kept making comments about how Buck knew more, then the spreadsheets, how these guys never played, and when the O's lost, I quoted one of his tweets from the night with a comment along the lines of, "Buck sure knew best," and he blocked me instantly. I got blocked by Jenny McCarthy for replying something positive about vaccinations. "How dare you challenge my beliefs with knowledge and science?" Not what you asked for, in fact, the complete opposite. At the time, I was pretty heavily anti-Chael Sonnen, the MMA fighter, and I called him out for his antics on Twitter, being a typical youthful edgelord like I was. While all this was going on, I was in the process of raising money for charity. I grew my hair and beard for a year, no trimming, no grooming, no nothing. I'd been putting the link out on my Twitter quite heavily to try and get donations. Wouldn't you know, Mr. Sonnen ignored all of my crap talking and actually donated to my fundraising. It really made me look in the mirror and look at him as a person. Now I'm a couple of years older and I can see that he's actually a pretty decent guy who played a character for promotion purposes. In short, I griefed an MMA fighter on Twitter. He donated to my fundraising instead of getting angry. You know, it's nice to see some sort of reflection from these people once they've grown up a bit. And he may not have even been aware of your devastating roasts, to be honest. I don't follow MMA fighters, but they always seem to have a disproportionate amount of wealth and success and followings to what I expect. I started a podcast about comic books. I'm not a Twitter user, but apparently it's a thing you do. So I started following the accounts of numerous artists and writers. I hadn't followed comics in decades, so I had no idea about whatever drama was going on. Turns out that by following some people, I'm on some sort of block list for other people's Twitter. What's crazy is that it's an industry in trouble. Comics used to sell much better than today. It used to be you were cancelled if you sold less than 100,000 copies. Today, the average comic from DC or Marvel sells around 8,000 copies. So the notion of blocking potential readers is odd to me. I got blocked by Joel Osteen for tweeting, "If he could, Jesus would slap the frick out of Joel Osteen's slimy plastic face." But was I wrong? Alec Baldwin blocked me for saying that Boss Baby sucked. I got blocked by Kevin Durant after I asked him how Draymond's butthole tasted. I made fun of a Call of Duty esports player by saying his nose was big, to which he blocked me. I then met him at a gaming event in New Orleans where I shook his hand and asked him to unblock me, which he did right in front of me. I proceeded to tweet about his nose again, and I'm still blocked to this day. I got blocked by William Shatner. He was fighting on Twitter with a coworker of mine, and I responded with something like, "This seems like a misunderstanding. Please don't fight." He proceeded to talk trash about my job title, and I responded something like, "Whoa, I'm a fan. When my mum was fighting cancer, one of the things that made her smile was when we'd watch Boston Legal together." And then he blocked me and basically everyone who works at my company. So yeah, screw that guy. Yeah, he's notoriously hot and cold with fans. One moment he'll be super sweet and act like you're the world to him. Next moment he'll be shanking your mom to death for being in the same airport as him. CNN blocked me because I sent them a picture of Patrick Star punching SpongeBob after I told them a violent fight broke out in downtown LA. My husband. He kept reminding the singer Brandy about the time she ran over someone. He personally dislikes Brandy and finds it ridiculous that everyone just got over the fact that she killed someone with her car. I thought him getting blocked was appropriate and also hilarious. My husband always tells me about how he made a Twitter account to share a nice comic he doodled with Wizards of the Coast, and he got banned from Twitter for it. One tweet. Jonah Hill blocked me for repeatedly commenting, "Do you like propane and propane accessories as much as your Uncle Hank?" A famous writer blocked me because I told her how hormones work in males and females and how having less testosterone didn't make women bad at logic. She does workshops about this stuff and people pay up to $200 to attend it. It's usually targeting women to teach them how to be more masculine in terms of being smart and confident and stuff. Utter garbage. I got blocked by Janelle from Teen Mom, and yes, I'm stretching famous quite a lot here.
I called her a trash piece of crap mum. I still don't think I'm wrong. My friend got blocked by Trump because he kept tweeting at him about how hot he thought he was and begging to bang him. I was blocked by Craig Ferguson because I tweeted at him that his mustache was ugly. The mustache was short-lived. This is my crappy story about meeting the legitimately rad dude Doug Benson as I waited for my in and out order. Back when Twitter was text-only, 40404, no app, I was a junior in high school. Still pretty straight edge, and I thought it was funny. I'd been trolling Doug Benson of all people and being a genuine jerk. He blocked me. Cut to 10 years later, and I'm a large advocate of Green Herb. I'm really into the LA comedy scene, and Doug is one of my favorites. A really funny comedian. He's in Trailer Park Boys, Super High Me, has great podcasts, and is very connected to his online audience. I've seen his Doug Loves Movies show live multiple times at this point. I'm seeing another show with my buddy, and we were in standing room only. My buddy and I leave a little early to catch a bite, and as we're walking back to my car, we catch Doug in the alley, smoking with a circle of guys around him, all talking about their favorite things of his. I'm not a fan of meeting people I like in real life, getting photos and all that crap. Our relationship through my headphones is enough for me. But I figure, hey, this would be a great time to finally get back access to his Twitter, so I can at least know if he's coming to my town in a bit more advance notice than just hearing about it in a podcast the week it happened. We go over to him, I ask him if he wouldn't mind unblocking me as I go in, and he's just genuinely really cool about it. He asks why he would have blocked me in the first place, and I said I was just a stupid high school kid. He unblocks me, and as he's clicking through, he passes me the doobie. He, my buddy, and I smoke it out for a minute and we shoot the crap with him. I feel like it's time to go, shake his hand, and we go on our merry way. Pretty perfect outcome in my book. Amy Schumer did one of those "tell me something I don't know" tweets. I was the first one to reply, "comedy," and blocked. Man, you guys do not like Amy Schumer, do you? The narrator has made it to his 30s without ever seeing a full piece of any of her comedy or movies, but surely she doesn't deserve as much hate as some of the other people we're hearing about here. I called out Vinod Khosla, a horrible billionaire who tried to keep people off his California beachfront property. This was unsuccessful, as the beaches of California are public, so he took it all the way to the Supreme Court, trying to use bizarre legal arguments that could have stripped everyone in the country of these gorgeous and awesome public beaches. When he saw a photo of traffic in LA during Thanksgiving and spun some bullcrap venture capitalist Silicon Valley D-bag disruptor yarn about how this could all be better with autonomous pods traveling on fixed routes, I said, "Oh, you mean like public transit? Will it be truly public, or would you keep those you don't like off it like you struggle to deny public beach access?" He blocked me. Oh, and he lost the case. Public beach access is still a thing, and he has to let every smelly beach bum onto his beach. Good riddance, and F you butthole. I got blocked by Kanye West after tagging him in a picture of an answer key a few years back. I got blocked by Steve Shives. Also, Will Wheaton blocked me after I called him a prick. I was blocked by Nick Crompton for tweeting that England was in fact not a city. I got blocked by Jenna Elfman for linking, I didn't even tweet, her disastrous Ask Me Anything on Reddit when all the comments turned to her involvements with Scientology. I was blocked by the Stone Cold Creamery Instagram because I kept DMing them memes. Not me, but a friend tweeted at Bush his McDonald's receipt with the order 911, asking if he had his order. Corey Feldman blocked me because I listened to a radio show that did a whole bit mocking him. You know, I don't really know what else I expected, but 99% of these are just flat-out admissions from people trolling celebrities. Wow, people really don't want to hear from you anymore after you tell them they suck and to go choke on a whole bag of Johnsons? Really? Got blocked by John Crook for making one nut jokes and hashtagging one nut Crook on all of them. I was blocked by a YouTuber who recently brought a pedigree kitten. To justify not rescuing a cat, instead she said she was allergic to rescue cats and could only get a pedigree. I said, with no hatred intended, that being a rescue doesn't mean they can't be pedigree as well, it just means they don't have a home. Blocked. Smash Mouth announced a tour with Toad the Wet Sprocket and announced a contest to name the tour. I suggested the Washed Up Tour and got insta-banned. No sense of humor. I'm currently blocked by Melania Trump because I replied to one of her tweets with a meme about her husband looking like a burnt potato. I'm blocked by Krista Elia on everything and he recorded it.
After seeing his Man on Fire special, I commented on his Instagram post, "Man on Fire wasn't great. That's it. Just my opinion on his special. Although his previous work and podcasts are amazing." So he goes through the thousands of comments, sees mine, and blocks me on Instagram. I find out weeks later. One day he tweets something and I reply, "Wait, can you unblock me on Instagram?" He replies with a laugh and blocks me on Twitter as well. The worst part is he recorded himself blocking my Twitter and posts it on Instagram. I can't link you because I'm blocked, but scroll down to around June of 2018 and you'll see the video. I was blocked by George Lopez because my friend told me to tweet him to fist my butt. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.